Like I said, we like to start off just going chronologically, and anything you feel we need to talk about, just let it go. It's not going to be 100% in order, but
No.
we do what we can. And if you could, we like to start with the parents and just where did your parents come from and what was their story?
Okay. I'll identify them as I go along. My name is Jose Angel Ramirez. I am the third of a family of 8. My parents were Carmen Villarreal Ramirez, my father Heriberto Garcia Ramirez, and both parents were born in Texas, and so were my grandparents and my great-grandparents, and as far back as you can count, just about. So we originally all Texas and Southwest born. We didn't cross the river, so to speak.
How long has your family been in Texas?
Back to 1700 and something.
Wow.
Possibly even before that. And we have a whole suitcase full of heritage stuff back there. But what is unusual about my parents, not unusual, but perhaps amazing, that neither one of them had any formal education. In those days, to have a well-grounded Spanish education is supposed to be a great strength. So my mother and my father, I think I would estimate they had probably a 5th grade privately tutored education in Spanish. My dad could speak English and my mother a little bit, but my father was not really fluent in English. And it just staggers the imagination that in the little cow town where I was born in Alice, Texas, there was so little to do in those days. You're talking about the early 1920s. Oil, cattle, cotton was big, but outside of that, there was very little to do. But here is a man who had given him credit, a 5th grade education. Yet he built his own house, and he was very enterprising. He was a very industrious little man, very industrious individual. He constructed a house in Alice which still stands. And the house had 2 entrances, 2 front entrances. Now, considering the times, I thought that was pretty weird, if not rather advanced. The idea being that he felt that in those days, the living room, which was the parlor, was very vital because that way they could entertain their friends. But the other door, for the noisy kids that might interrupt, they could just go on the second door, go through the bedrooms, get to the back, wherever they're going, without interfering with the adults being entertained in the parlor. And I thought that was very unusual. And to this day, I think it's the most amazing.
When were your parents married?
In 19... She was 18. She was born in 1895, married 18 years. When she was 18, that would be what?
13.
13? Okay. Thereabouts. And what my father did also, if you've seen many old towns that have home-built homes, so to speak, without a general contractor, and what they did, they just put them on oak pins, underpinnings, either oak or, in that part of the country, mesquite. So you see the house and you see the bottom of the house is exposed. You got cats and dogs and everything else. Well, my dad wouldn't allow that. So he put a skirt on the house. In other words, he would take wood-sided and take it all the way down to the ground, and then would have trap doors in the back or the side. What I thought even at that time was pretty clever, pretty ingenious. And so he had a pretty good outlook towards building. Again, he became an extraordinary carpenter. to the extent that years later in the Valley, he was highly regarded because of his cabinet work. Lawyers' wives would say, "Mr. Ramirez, when are you going to build me your kitchen cabinets?" You know, this type of thing. And that was long before, of course, when they had quality tools like they have nowadays. My son, who is a great handyman, more than a handyman, has always marveled at the advance in the tools. My dad had to make his own miter box saw and this type of thing. So I thought my dad was very enterprising along those lines. Specifically, again, keep yourself in the early 1920s, and my dad lived in a little bit outskirts of town, which not much of a town in those days, but he had a windmill. Oh. And one of the few that had a windmill. Most of them had a well that you pull water out with a bucket. And he used to sell water. And I thought to myself, that's very commendable, but I don't see how later when I began to understand what he had done in the past. I was 11, 12 years old. I said, "Daddy, how did you make money selling water?" He said, "Well," he said, "son, selling water was not the object. What he had done, he had devised a series of coins, little round coins. And he would have a box full, and the man would come buy water, and he would, for 5 cents, he would give him a handful of coins. So when a man came with his horse-drawn little cart and a barrel to carry the water away, he would take his coin and put it in a cigar box with a slit in the top. Therefore, that poor farmer would be paying for his water. But in essence, what my father was doing, he did not want the individual to lose his self-respect and pride. He was paying for water. And this token fashion, which was nothing, but it was an act to the recipient of that water, means that I'm paying for the water. After all, I bought this coins. And I thought to myself that, wow, that's pretty decent. And his whole life was a little bit that way. I thought that in addition to that was the fact that he felt that he could do more. We lived in Alice, I did, from 1921 to 1924. In 1924, he took his family to the Rio Grande Valley. He felt perhaps that the valley had more to offer in the construction business and house building. And again, when we get to McAllen in the valley, he rented a home, rented a couple maybe in those days, and then at the same time, he pursues to build another home for his family. And we're talking about now pre Wall Street crash, 1929. So you're approaching that era. But even in the middle 20s, it was still pretty tough in that part of the world. You may have had the roaring 20s in New York, and everybody was having a good time, but it wasn't the case in other parts of the country. And South Texas was no exception. So the next thing you know, my dad had built another house, although this time he didn't put two front doors. But the same approach. He put skirts on a house. He built a house for a neighbor or a friend of ours in Godoy, which also still stands in McAllen, made out of brick. And I often think I wish he had made his homes out of brick, because they will be still standing. But that house also stands. And while he was in the valley, he and his brother decided to go into business, so they established the Valley Cafe, which was really not a good time to start business, but they thought that was the way to go. So they had this big Valley Cafe, and we used to peddle announcements up and down the Rio Grande Valley, big Thanksgiving dinners at the Valley Cafe. But it was a wrong time to go into business. While my daddy was enterprising, so were the boys. We were all newsboys to start with. We sold newspapers in the street, and we delivered newspapers. And that was a very difficult operation because we had to get up at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, go deliver newspapers and rush home, maybe grab a bite to eat and go to school. And in the evening, come back and sell, rush home, change clothes, and go sell newspapers on the street. And we delivered the Houston Post, the San Antonio Light, came by train from San Antonio, and in the afternoons we would sell the Brownsville Herald, which is a very popular newspaper. So we were kids on our own right off very early. I was selling newspapers when I was about 8 years of age in the streets. And today, thinking about letting your child go out in the streets today is a hazardous experience, and certainly a heart-wrenching moment for the mother. And I'm sure my mother had moments of her own. But
you say, sir, that you moved to McAllen in 1924.
1924.
When did your father start the cafe?
I would say about 1926.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And his primary career before that was a cabinet maker?
A carpenter, all around carpenter.
Okay.
And there's still homes. My brother lives in one he built. When I say he built a home, I mean he built it by himself. Because in Texas you don't have basements in most parts, so he could actually erect a wall by himself. I've seen him do it. He was so industrious. My father was so industrious that if he could, he would go home for lunch to change clothes because he was soaking wet. It happens to me too. When I play golf, I soak excessively. But he was such industrious. He would never give a man 8 hours. He'd give him 8.5, 9 hours. He didn't care. He loved craftsmanship. And so he was quite a guy. As newsboy, we became exposed to town. We had all the incidents you can imagine. I saw a man run over by a train. I couldn't eat for 3 weeks. And then through the gracious of the Lord, a fellow in our church said, "Why don't you try caddying, golf caddying?" And I was so relieved to get out of the newspaper business that when I started caddying, I didn't want to come home. I was so fascinated with the game and so fascinated with the activity and the fact that it was a game of rules and law and regulation and decor, and that was very fascinating. I started.
Or your family ever played any golf before? Or?
No, none of us had ever played any golf before, and I started caddying the 14th day of April, 1934. And so I caddied for the golfer with the most outrageous temperament in the history of the game. And the Texas Monthly of December carries an article on the Lefty Stackhouse, but that's another story. But
what was the name of the? He carries an article on.
The Texas Monthly has an insert. The December 2000 issue has an insert and describing of the unknown by recognized distinguished golfers of the state of Texas, and one of them is Lefty Stackhouse. But he later became a golf coach at Seguin, Texas, and apparently did quite well with the high school kids. But he had a lot of weaknesses that a lot of people had in those days. They took to drink, and it took him some years before we went to Alcoholics Anonymous and became a pretty good citizen and did some great things with the high school kids in Seguin. But Lefty was unusual, to say the least. He walked through the lake on me one day, and I couldn't find him. It was just he and I playing early in the morning. I was waiting he hit the ball down the fairway, and I was waiting for him to come up, and it didn't show. And I thought, well, I think he went to the clubhouse to get some cigarettes. In those days, cigarettes were quite the thing. And the first hole had a lake in front of it. But no problem for the good golfer. They could fly the ball over the lake. The caddies were down the fairway waiting for the ball. So I was standing beside the ball and no Lefty Stackhouse, and he was a very he looked mean all the time because he had the impression that he had to hit a straight ball every time, and you don't do that with golf. You do the best you can with what you do. Put it in a small grass in the short hair in the fairway. But anyhow, he had taken his hat off of my head. I had an old fedora. He said, "Hey, Happy, come on." So So he took the hat off of my head, he put it on his, and then after waiting for him out in the fairway in Nose Life, the Stackhouse, I thought, well, I better pick up the ball. He must have gone to the clubhouse. Next thing I know, I look towards the lake, and here's my hat surfacing from the lake. He had walked through the lake up to here. And in those days, when you polished a pair of white shoes, it was a very painful experience because you had to daub it with a little white pad, and now you have synthetics that you don't even do but wipe them, And all I could do when Lefty Stackhouse came to the ball, soaking wet, with my fedora askew on his head, and I said, Lefty, your shoes. He was sopping wet, but all I can think about is your white shoes. And he said, Happy, don't worry about it. So we kept on playing.
Was that his nickname for you, Happy?
Boy, they called me Happy. The owner of the McAllen Municipal Courts, a huge man named Henry Whittenberg, called me Happy. And he said I was very optimistic, and they like for me to caddy all the time. And so with Lefty. I had another experience with Lefty when he broke all his clubs. Every single one. He had just received them from A.G. Spaulding in San Antonio and said, come on, Happy. And so we took off early in the morning. The idea is to get there early in the morning in order to get the charge, get a player, So I was always early at the golf course. And so we took off, just he and I, and we were going down. And on the sixth hole, which is a par 3 going along the highway from McAllen to Reynosa, across the border, it was not a difficult hole, but in those days, the idea was to hit the ball right to left and control it. Well, a right to left is a hook. Left to right is a slice. And a right to left may come this way, but it may not. Same thing with the other one. But Lee Trevino says you cannot talk to a hook. In other words, it can run wild on you. When it hits the ground, it goes, because it's got overspin. With a slice, it's going this way, you can talk to a slice more. No, you can control it more. And Lee Trevino said you don't have to hit a perfect straight ball, you have to control it. And this is what made Lee Trevino so famous. But in this particular case, Lefty Stackhouse hit a 6-iron and didn't quite come around, but it landed behind a mesquite tree. But it still had a shot around this tree to chip it up to the green. And we had just received this new set of clubs, Robert T. Jones. And said, Happy, put the bag there, and when I take a club out, you step back. I said, yeah, Lefty, what are you going to do? He said, well, just put the bag there. I said, okay. So I put the bag down, he took a club, wham, again, a mesquite tree. Brand new clubs. I didn't even own a club. So I'm salivating, he's got destroying clubs. He broke every one of them. We finished with a driver and a wedge and a putter. And when he got to the clubhouse, he put them back in the carton in which they came, and he put a note in it to A.G. Spaulding back in San Antonio. He said, damn it, I said lightweight, damn it. And that's all he said, send him back. That was Lefty.
And was he a golf pro? I mean, what kind of...
Yes, he was a golf professional.
So, I mean, this was toward the beginning of the Depression.
This was 19th, in the middle 30s. I started caddying 14th day of April 1934. And you say, Joe, how come you remember those days? They're monumental dates in my life. I graduated from being a newsboy. And so I know so well. So Lefty Stackhouse came in 35 and 36. We left McAllen in 1937. And it was, while I was in McAllen, I had childhood experiences, but they're significant. Every year they had Boys' Day in McAllen. All the big machos come up and take the boys out, And we'd go to Lake Conception. Why girls? I don't know, but it was boys, I guess, Boys' Day. We went to Lake Conception for an outing, and they would have hot dogs. If they were hamburgers, I don't remember. Maybe it slide of watermelon. And we'd go swimming in Lake Conception. Well, Lake Conception was an ugly, dirty, dangerous lake. It was full of fallen trees. A lake that may have been something in its prime, but it was not a place for kids to be swimming. It had an old cabin. It was dilapidated and had a pier running into the water for a space. And there were no lifeguards. Everybody was on his own. So some had bathing suits, some did not, and some just jumped in the water when the paydays. You remember the paydays? Strapped the wear of the kids in those days. So after diving and swimming around, I realized that there were thorny mesquites and thorny huizaches. Huizaches is a very famous thorny bush in Texas, particularly in deep South Texas. And it's just full of thorns that had fallen into the water, and I realized that it was dangerous. No one knew what was below the water. It was kind of an abandoned old lake. So I finally got out of the water and went over on the pier. And I looked out there, and no one was paying attention, and everybody wants to swim, whether you could swim or not. The kids seeing the others want to do the same thing. So it was a set of twins in their paydays. They went in the water. They were chunky. I'll never forget, as long as I lived, they were much heavier than I was. And I realized that they were struggling, and no one was paying attention to. They were going down. So right then and there, I ran off the pier and jumped in the water and went after them, and they were quite a ways out. And when I got there, you can imagine what a drowning person looks like. He's grappling for one another. They were just grabbing at each other and going down at the same time. And it was frightening because I couldn't grab them because they were so desperate and so concerned of what was going on. They realized the water was dangerous. So what I eventually did, managed to get behind them somehow. I went around them and got behind them and got them by the paydays, by the straps. And I would kick and push them, kick and push them, kick and push them, and I brought them in. Otherwise, they would have drowned. And by that time, when I finally got close to the pier, they finally realized that this was a serious matter. And they all came out and, oh, so this boy gets the first hot dog today. That was my price.
There you go.
So, then I learned to swim very early in life. We swam in the irrigation canals of McAllen, and so I can swim even today. My wife said he doesn't swim; he just glides over the water. Another occasion, again, a bunch of kids going to swim in the irrigation canal. When they were irrigated, that was good water, and some of the canals were concrete based, so it was nice. And then, of course, they go under the highway, under the bridge, and on through. So this particular day, a bunch of kids were swimming as the canal went under the road, and it was nice because you could jump off of a concrete edge and then swim back if you could swim. But this particular time, a little Indian girl jumped in the water, and she didn't know how to swim. And I thought, what is she doing in the water? And no one was paying attention to her, and she was going down. And I had gotten out of the water on the side, and I realized that this child was frantic. And I jumped from the road into the water and went up and got her. And she was tough. She was also a heavy child, and she was tough because she wasn't about to listen. When you're drowning, you don't listen. So I had a heck of a time getting there and getting to shore. I got her finally to the end of the overpass and got her out. And she was gasping and this type of thing. But anyhow, those are tremendous experiences that you don't forget. The Valley had good school systems. I enjoy the Rio Grande Valley quite much.
Well,
and
was your schooling primarily in Spanish or English or both?
No, we were tutored in English. And the interesting thing about it also is the fact that there were no segregated schools. I never went to a segregated school. I went to integrated school. And the question says, what did you speak at home? I spoke both. But my mother, who was very pro-education, would never let us forget English first. English first. And we always mixed it. We always spoke Spanish and English. But we were more leaning towards learning the English language because this is our country. And this is what Mother felt very strongly. It's wonderful to be bilingual. It's really very, very enjoyable because you begin to appreciate what life is all about. You have a better understanding. You have two cultures, really, what it amounts to. You can't deny it. And it's a world of difference. I was Junior National Honor Society 2 years or more. My sister was National Honor Society, and my sister graduated the second highest, what is the valedictorian. She was a rather progressive gal, and poor, so poor. I'll never forget that when she graduated, she didn't have a dress to wear, and it was I was very concerned with my mother. My mother was a tremendous dressmaker. She used to make our shirts. I used to get compliments from the teachers all the time. She used to make it out of fabric, out of pongee. Is there such a thing as pongee? She used to make it a pongee, and very, very excellent, outstanding dressmaker. So here's my sister about to graduate, and she didn't have a dress. So I was going to sell newspapers that evening, and I walked through the corner of somebody's yard, just to take a little cut through the yard to save some steps. After all, we did a lot of walking. I think I was born walking. To this day, I walk a golf course. I don't ride a cart, and I walk a very difficult golf course. And my wife will tell you that. Anyhow, walking through this yard, I saw a piece of paper that looked like money, but it was a nondescript piece of paper because I was not familiar with a $20 bill. And this was 1936, and it was wet. So I didn't know what it was all about. I thought it was Mexican money. And I picked it out, put it in my pocket, and I think I was going to a store for Mother, and I came back, and I showed Mother what I had, and she said, "Oh, my God." She says, "It's a $20 bill." So they went to the fire and would try to dry it out. And with that $20 bill, my sister was able to get a new dress and graduate.
About how much did you earn as a newsboy
Oh,
or as a caddy?
we were on 2 cents for every newspaper we sold. And I'll never forget as long as I live. The first money I ever earned, I sold 7 newspapers. I was 8 years old. I went to a 5 and 10 cent store, which is not even in existence anymore, called McCrory's. I think you probably did. And with 14 cents in my pocket, I bought my mother a little cream pitcher. Tiny cream pitcher. And 2 cents for candy for me. What was interesting about that little pitcher is the fact that the spout was in the form of a deer head. So when you pour the cream, it would pour through the spout of this head of the deer. And I was fascinated with it. That little pitcher became an item in our family. My paternal grandmother used to come every summer to help my mother, who had a brooded kid. Well, my mother didn't need help. She was a very efficient lady, very able, and a beautiful human being. Well, my grandmother became fascinated with a little picture that was in the house. And she said, "Carmelita," my mother was Carmen, she called her Carmelita, "me la das, you'll give it to me." And my mother said, "No. Can't do it." "Oh, yes, you're going to give it to me." And she spent 30 days with us or so. And when she left, she took it. She took a picture. And we have been trying for many years to retrieve that little picture. We know where the picture is. It's in Heavenville, Texas. And when my wife and I visited there, January of '79, coming back from a visit in Mexico one time, we told the young kids, the members of the family, actually my daddy's half-brother's children, about this picture. And they said that, yes, we know the picture and we'll make sure that it gets back to your house. Well, it never did. And my mother collected pictures from there after. She always collected little pictures. We left McAllen Thursday of October 1937. The reason we left McAllen was because times were tough. You really get to the height of the Depression, and the valley had a propensity economically to get a backlash from Mexico. The times were hard in the country. The valley got it more so because I guess Mexico peso was devaluated and this type of. Oh, it had a relationship. Today, I guess the valley is pretty self-sustaining, but in those days there was a kind of a backlash. So we moved back to Alice, where I was born, which was a dry, dusty, arid place from a grassy, beautiful Rio Grande Valley, and then no golf course. But my daddy was able to be gainfully employed in Alice, and we survived in Alice, and finally they started a golf course with sand greens. You put the ball on the sand, and you have a little rake, and you rake a smooth spot, and then you roll the ball to the hole. And so we began to caddy, so that helped. But we were no longer newsboys. We did odd jobs here and there, and everybody tried to survive. We used to bring home 50 cents and give it to mom and daddy. When we were newsboys in the valley, that was, daddy was looking forward for the 50 cents we made on Sunday and this type of thing. But in Alice, we didn't sell newspapers. We did odd jobs and caddied most of the time. I was a basketball player in Alice, and interestingly enough, I didn't expect Alice to have good schools, but they did. Alice had good schools, not as good as the Valley, but they had good schools, and very pro football, of course. And I was a basketball star, considering that I wasn't very high and didn't have long arms, but I was a pretty good shooter. And I did make the sport page. Ramirez leads Cowboys against Buccaneers, and the Buccaneers in Corpus Christi were mighty football players and basketball players. So we upset them one time, and I was the leading scorer of that game, and the town went crazy. And I tried to retrieve that headline years later, and I couldn't. But great moments of a little guy's life. We were all very good rounded athletes. And I have a brother, David, who's a retired postman, who could play on the golf tour today in the senior tour. And he is in the 70s, and he's just a magnificent athlete. He was a star quarterback in high school and a tremendous baseball player and an outstanding golfer. And he still lives in Alice. He lives in Alice in the same home that my daddy built. Of significance in Alice in my life was time of graduation. When I was 19 years of age in 1940, I was due to graduate in 1940. I came down with pneumonia, and almost died. And so I couldn't finish many of my studies in 1940, so I had to graduate in 1941. But the interesting thing about it, or the sad thing about it, was the fact that I had not started school until I was 7 years, 4 months old in McAllen. In those days, you had to be 7 years of age, and no preschool education, no kindergarten, no nothing. So when I started in the first grade, I was a lost little boy. So, and time compounded, so I graduated high school when I was 20 years of age. When I graduated, the salutatorian was Mike Rodriguez, who was a little fellow, very bright, who later became the comptroller of the Tex-Mex Railroad in Texas. For a time, the Tex-Mex was the only railroad in America that made any money. And you know more about it than I do. I think it runs from Laredo to Corpus to San Antonio and back to Laredo, that type of triangle. And it was a very efficient railroad. He became a comptroller of the railroad. But he had to make a speech when he graduated, and he came to me at the house and said, "Joe, Ramirez says, I need your help." I said, "What's the problem, Mike?" He said, "I cannot make the speech." "What are you talking about? There's nothing to it." Joe said, "I can't do it." And he begged me several days. I said, "Mike," I said, "I can't help you. I said, "Your Honor, I could have had it. I could have made good grades, but I had so many credits already because I missed a year and I had more than the 16 credit hours that you required. To make a long story short, we finally had to go before the school principal and the school superintendent. They both knew me. The superintendent who played golf, so I knew him quite well. And the question is, can he do it? Can you allow? Well, I kept saying the credit is not mine. So suffice to say that they agreed to allow me to make the presentation. And I happened to have made A's in speech class. So there must have been a propensity to handle the English language a little bit. When they allowed the assignment, they just threw me to the jungle. No teacher helped me. Not even my beloved speech teacher, Mrs. Harvey. And she talked about me when I was gone many times. So I had to devise my own composition, which is not easy to do when you realize that it's really, your heart's not completely in it. So finally I wrote on subject on the privileges of citizenship. And the program is on my desk, and you'll see it before. I'll just give you a show and tell before you go. And when I delivered the speech, the crowd went wild. The stage set like this with a big window on the side where people can look through the window. They're looking right on the stage. And the janitor of the school, Frank Reynolds, a big, tall, slim man, was standing right at the window. And he heard it. When I finished, they all stood up and applauded. I'll never forget Frank Reynolds, the janitor, jumping up and down and clapping. The next day, I went to the golf course. Very fine old gentleman, oil man, named Emerson Sane, came up to me and said, "Joe," said, "I understand you made quite a speech last night." I said, "I don't know." The day after that, the University of Texas sent a representative to locate me. My mother used to say, with a brand new station wagon, this man came from the University of Texas. Well, you know how it is when you're young, anxious, you're glad the high school was over. I had torn up the speech and I wasn't interested anymore. But they never located me. I was somewhere golf course, but they were looking for me. They wanted to interview me or do something. They certainly couldn't give me a scholarship because I think the scholarship eventually went to Mike Rodriguez, justly so. Some modest thing too. Is it Hardin Simmons, the college in Texas? To Hardin Simmons, and Mike never took advantage of it, but it was very, very modest. But anyhow, University of Texas wanted to interview me, and they never located me. Interestingly, also that I was really, what I told you earlier, that I was really tongue-tied when I was a little boy. I guess because I was tongue-tied because I was so happy sucking my fingers. And they didn't need to talk. When I graduated, I realized that I had graduated beyond the age that most of them graduate. And furthermore, the pressures, the economic pressures, and the limitations and restrictions, and the discrimination was awful. Interestingly, though, as brutal as discriminatory practices are, it never overwhelmed my family. We were really go-getters. We were very, very industrious in our modest ways. We never said die, but it was tough. Living in Alice was really, really tough. So the government had instituted a national program called NYA, National Youth Administration. So right after I graduated, some representative of the program cornered me at the post office and told me about it. And I said, yes, I'll sign up. The NYA program in Texas was run by Lyndon B. Johnson. Years later, when I talked to Lyndon Johnson, she said, oh, you're one of my daddy's boys. So what it constituted was going to Texas A&I and train to be an aircraft and marine sheet metal apprentice. You did 8 hours of hard work, construction work, and they served you 3 meals, very starchy meals, but they're more than most of us had.
When you say very starchy, what sort of things were?
Bread, beans, and rice, and bologna and once in a while, that type of thing.
Where was it that you were sent to?
This was Texas A&I in Kingsville, Texas. They had cinder block dormitories on the side near the racetrack where the famous King Ranch had trained their horses. And they eventually had a conductor every winter. Assault, I think, was the King Ranch product. And what we would do hard work, construction work, do half a day, and then go to school the other half. And we practice with aviation snips and made canteens for the King Ranch and made little miniature ailerons, which are part of the airplane and this type of thing, using a riveting gun. And some were very good. Some were just exposed to something new and they all struggled, but we all managed to do quite well. There were several real talented people. There was one individual from Austin, Texas, and I'd give my right arm to see him again. Brilliant, brilliant man. Brilliant young man. Oh, he was brilliant. And he was good with his hands. He was not a very handsome individual. I think his mother had abandoned him, but he was head and shoulders above the rest of us. So when we finally finished the 10-month course, we were due to go to the Naval Air Station to be interviewed for the job for which we were duly trained.
Do you remember the name? Sorry to interrupt. Do you remember the name of the gentleman that?
No, I wish I could. I would have found him, but I guess I can if I do a little more research now with the advent of computers. I think I can put an ad in the paper in Austin and just say who went to Texas NYA during this time frame, and I think I can find him. But he was absolutely a super individual. When we went to the Naval Air Station after graduation, not a single one of us duly trained for an apprenticeship job at the Naval Air Station was hired. But they were hiring people off the street. I didn't know anything about civil service. Neither did the instructor who took us there. But you knew that they were hiring off the street. But not a single one of us that was duly trained were hired.
Hiring at the Naval Air Station?
At the Naval Air Station.
Would that go through the service or?
No. It would be a civil service job. And the pay would have been modest. It would have been something like less than $100 a month. But it would have been salvation. I think I possibly would have stayed in the state of Texas. So when I realized that the world had kind of closed a little more on me, I said, no. No. I went back home And I was sitting in front of a huge furniture store that sold secondhand and new furniture. Very dejected. And here comes one of my schoolmates who was a magnificent piano player, possibly one of the finest that ever played music in the state of Texas. He said, "Joe Ramirez, what's the problem?" I said, never mind. He was not the brightest student. He wasn't a good student, but he was a magnificent piano player, a music man. Well, he said, "I'm going to Washington." Little did he know that I was right there sitting at that furniture store thinking, I'm going to leave in the next few days by bus out of here. I'm going to go east. I was a little bit reluctant about going east because I was afraid of the weather. I had never seen ice or snow. And you hear about it in the paper. So when Al Flores said, I'm going to Washington, I said, which Washington, Al? Washington State or Washington, D.C.? Oh, I said, Washington, D.C. All right, Al, how come you're going to Washington, D.C.? Well, I said, I took a civil service exam. Well, I didn't know what a civil service exam was talking about. I went to Corpus Christi and I took a civil service exam. Well, he was a piano player. He had taken typing in class, so had I. And he was very, very good with the fingers, so he passed it. And Washington wired him. Remember, the war had come. This was after December 7th. So they were hiring people from all over the country.
When the war started at Pearl Harbor, what did you know where you were about the build-up and everything else? Were you prepared for such a thing to happen? Did you expect the war would come?
I'm going to send you a copy of an email that I had with my son. Where were you December 7th? Well, I was at Texas A&I. They took us out of bed on Sunday morning. I didn't know what it was all about. Get out quickly with no breakfast, no nothing. And we went out and unloaded many cars of bricks in a cold winter Sunday morning. No breakfast, no lunch, no nothing, in a hurry. Got to relieve the trains because the war had come. And this is what happened. I was not prepared. I didn't know what it was all about, but I knew that we were in conflict. I knew that I was going to be drafted, and I wanted to serve. I wanted to do more. And I frankly didn't want to be drafted in the state of Texas. I felt I would have been cannon fodder, and many were cannon fodder. On the day I became 21 years of age, 24th day of April, I accompanied my friend Al Flores in the Greyhound bus, and we came to Washington. It took us 2 days. I had a beautiful experience in seeing New Orleans, and a cab driver telling a lady where to go with her fancy Easter bonnet. And I thought, how ugly he's talking to that lady. The lady said, I'll have your license taken away. Apparently the driver cut him off. She almost went off the side of the sidewalk. You know, New Orleans is a very small streets, very narrow street. And she was chastising this taxi. I said, I'll tell you, my husband's a commissioner. I'll have your license taken. The driver sat there. Both cars were at a standstill. He was giving us a quick tour to the city for $1. I didn't want to go because $1 was a lot of money. I didn't have the money to spend sightseeing. But we had to spend the night there in the bus station. Anyhow, so here's this lady giving him the dickens because he was in a hurry to go to church with his 8-year-old child, and here's the cab driver almost caused an accident. So the driver just let her go on and on and on. She was, the language that woman was using, oh my God. It was a beautiful hat. The taxi cab driver gets out of the car very slowly, walks up to the lady. I said, you know what, lady? You could just go do it in your big hat. And he walked back in the car. Oh, I thought we were in trouble. Anyhow, I arrived in Washington that 26th day of April at 9:36 in the morning. I did not have a job. I did not know a soul. I had $3.86 to my name.
Had you ever been out of Texas before?
The farthest I'd been away from home was to San Antonio, 125 miles. They have never been out of Texas. had never been away from home. So they allowed me to live at 1446 Rhode Island Avenue here in Washington, Northwest, in a rooming house. But they didn't have a room for me, so they allowed me to live in a hall, I and my friend Al Flores. And I didn't have the $48 to charge per month, so I managed to get word to my dad. And my dad had a dentist friend in Alice who co-signed for him to borrow $50. So they sent me $50, so I was able to pay a month's rent. But I wouldn't go eat at the meals at the service because I was unemployed. All the other young kids and girls were all employed, and we had hundreds of thousands of them coming in here. All they needed clerical help in the worst kind of way. And I was too proud. In the meantime, I took another test, another typing exam when I got here. I saw the announcement, I went and took, but I flunked it. I didn't pass it. So I was very dejected. And everybody was gainfully employed. I thought, I'm not going to go home. I'm not going to go home. I don't care what. I applied to be a steel worker, and the man said, you can do it, but it's dangerous. I walked the streets. From 26th day of April, May, I was so hungry. I was sitting in the park, and a guy comes up to me and says, what's the problem? I said, oh, you hungry, aren't you? I said, yes. If there were social services in those days, I didn't know where they were. I wasn't exposed to them. Maybe they were. For them, I was too proud to go ask for help. This guy took me to White Tower. Remember White Tower? Sold little hamburgers, White Tower restaurant. He took me to White Tower and bought me a cup of coffee, which I didn't drink, but he insisted on a cup of coffee, and 2 donuts and a glass of tomato juice, which I never drank. First glass of tomato juice I ever drank in my life. And I never forgot him. And I know he meant well, but I also knew that he was a little homosexual. But I told him, I appreciate what you've done. And I know you and I are not on the same sheet of music. Yes, he said. I know you straight. I said, thank you. Shook his head. Here comes another announcement. I took another type exam and I passed it. And then a kind girl that I've been trying to find for so long took me to dinner. When the announcement and the mail came, the mail was on my cot. They said, go open it. Oh, no, I'll open it when we get back from dinner. So I went, opened the mail, they pushed me and go get it. And I had passed the exam. Police report 6th of June for induction to federal service. And I wanted to find this girl to just say thank you. She took me to dinner. She knew that I was a proud little guy, you know. I have never been able to find her. Her name was Elma Marion Pietri. She lived at 325 Sycamore Street in Vandergrift, Pennsylvania. And I can't find her. Little moments of life. So I went to report for induction on 6th day of June, 1942. I raised my right hand, swore to defend the country, blah, 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 on and on. About the same time that this was happening, some rascals stole all my clothes and shoes and everything.
Where were you staying at the time?
In 1446 Rhode Island, a rooming house, in a hall. They didn't have a room in the hall. So they went right through the hall all day long, you know. And I know who did it, a guy named Rose from West Virginia. I know who did it. And that was my beginning in government service. No sooner I started with government service, I started working for the Office of Dependents and Benefits. They're the people that prepared the family allowances for the families left behind when the soldier went to war. This is where my wife was, where I met my wife, and where she was such a magnificent asset to the, because everybody was afraid of the document research clerk. That is matching the marriage certificates and birth certificates with the application that had come in or maybe had not come in. But it's stacks and stacks. Very painful, very important aspect of the processing of the application. This is where we were. And no sooner we got started, it relocated to Newark, New Jersey from Washington. I said, oh my God. So here we go, October of 42, and it transferred to New Jersey. We were located on the Market Street, 213 Market Street, Washington Street in Newark, New Jersey, in a new Prudential building. The Prudential Insurance Company had just made constructed a new building there, but we occupied it. And that's where I met my wife. While I was there, we had our first date on Thanksgiving Day in 1942. And I wasn't even going out. We went out for sandwich Thanksgiving Day. We were working multi-shifts and this type of thing. The war was raging and what have you. But anyhow, I elected to send a letter to my draft board in Texas to transfer my number to New Jersey. I certainly didn't want to be drafted in Texas. I didn't want to be leaving my girlfriend behind. For our last moments together, I thought, well, I'll spend them here. And it wasn't long. On the 14th day of April, 1934, my number was called. But in the meantime, when I went to Newark, New Jersey, they made me an assistant supervisor. Right off the bat. I didn't have any experience whatsoever. But they made me assistant supervisor, and it was very challenging, and I learned a lot, but very frightening too, because you had urgency in the air, and you cannot make mistakes. You make mistakes, a check would be sent to the wrong gal or wrong family, this type of situation. But what I had to do was make sure that the process line moved, and including the document clerk, which turned out to be my wife. And Newark, New Jersey was dirty, cold, miserable town, and today it's the same way. And I was abducted by two blacks. One guy worked with me to jam me in the car. I want to know what I had. I said, what are you talking about, what I had? They took me out to dinner in some dark place and gave me a 3rd degree. And I said, what in the heck what's happening here, But suffice to say that I don't know what they had in mind, extortion or what. But I said, I'm just an old country boy from Texas. What's the problem?
Okay, this cape is almost out of.
Okay.
Alice.
Macau.
And what time? When was that your mother was sick?
1932 or 33. But I came all the way up 11. But it was frightening to see your mother put her in an ambulance. And I believe it is. Life tastes better when you have experienced it, when you have earned it. I tell kids, don't worry about having fun. No one is going to cheat you out of fun. When you work in a priority basis, take life run. When you have fun, it'll be better. It tastes better.
Recording.
I think it's
Let's play it.
He doesn't have his thing.
Oh.
Before, maybe he'd like some water. Would you have?
Oh, would you like any more water?
Yes, another.
Very much. Let me get it. Anybody else want anything?
How about you?
If there's more in the pot, I'll take the more coffee. Thank you so much.
Are we ready?
Yeah, we are.
I believe we've gotten through the draft.
No. Okay, let me go back. 14th day of April, 1943. Essex County says I'm being drafted. So I report to the county for examination. And I passed. The Marines wanted me. They were all in the same recruiting room. They wanted me, and I said, I'll go with the Army. So I was drafted in the Army. I reported to Fort Dix, New Jersey, which is not very far from Newark, New Jersey. And I was able to hope, I was thinking I could always come back and see my girlfriend. So Fort Dix Reception Center, a reception center during the urgency of the times. The war was at war. The United States was not at war. And the reception centers are processing centers. You have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people coming to the reception center. And what they do in 3 days, they give you a cursory exam, make sure you don't have tuberculosis, but more particularly, is your blood running? Are you warm? And they throw a bunch of clothes at you and give you shots and give you some equipment. And in 3 days, you're gone. God knows where. To refill replacements or to formulate another unit or on and on and on. Scattered. I stayed more than 3 days. They saw that I had a little administrative aptitude. They saw that I made a pretty high grade in my aptitude test, which is called they call it the qualification test of some kind. But I took the test under very adverse circumstances. They had told us that the draft board send all your clothes home, don't bring anything with you. Well, it was April and it was colder than tickets. And we stood outside waiting to get a cup of cocoa and a donut and all the die. But anyhow, and then I had to take the test. So I managed to have a good grade. But anyhow, they kept me at the reception center. No, the encampment is hundreds and hundreds of tents. So I stay in this tent. There'd be 3 or 4 guys coming in, and 3 days they're gone. But I stayed there. And I went to headquarters of the reception center to do administrative work. So, and they would let me go. So I thought, well, I was there April, I was in May, and I thought, whoa, what is this all about? And I was get a little concerned. I'm a persona non grata. But no, that wasn't the case. They knew that they needed me for what little administrative ability I had. In those days, we started doing the beginning of punch cards, and collecting data, this type of thing. So lo and behold, one day, I was on orders. I was going to ship out. I said, wonderful. Ramirez, you ship it out tomorrow. Get your gear. Go meet me at the depot. Blah blah blah. Railroad station. I said, okay. And so I was ready the next day. And where is the depot? Depot. I said, well, the depot's over there. It's about a mile and a half away. Be there at a certain hour. I said, okay. This was a small shipment. Normally they send hundreds out, maybe several hundreds or maybe 1,000 out. Also, this was a small shipment of 8 people. I think it was 8. A very unique shipment. I did not know it until later. Maybe I heard that there were 8. So here I am with a great big duffel bag, leaving this encampment, going to the athletic field, going across the athletic field, across the railroad tracks, onto the railroad tracks, and walking up the railroad tracks to the depot. And it was a painful experience, about a mile and a half. And of course, you begin to feel your childhood injuries too. My back went out, and I hurt my whole 3 years of service. I had fallen out of trees like in the other little boys, and I began to realize, boy, I'm having problems. When I get to the depot, the 7 others that were in the shipment were already there. So I said, how did you guys get here? Oh, so the sergeant brought us. The sergeant brought you? What did he bring you in? A 6x6, which is a truck. I said, you all came here and I didn't come in? Well, you're on the shipment. I said, yes, I'm on the shipment too. what the order was about was that you select 8 men, and one would be a supernumerary. Well, I didn't know what a supernumerary meant. That means in case somebody died between the time it got to ship it to the depot, to the railroad station, rather. Yeah. Well, I was made a supernumerary, but they didn't tell me that. And I thought, well, I'll get a ride back. He wouldn't ride me back to the encampment. So here I am again with this duffel bag, very frustrated, going back to the same tent that I had occupied for almost 2 months. When I came back, there was a fellow in a neighboring tent that took a liking to me and said, well, did you see the orders? I said, no. Well, I didn't. I wasn't that fluent enough as to, in those days, if I did, I didn't pay attention to go see the big bulletin board way down in the middle of the encampment in front of the company tent. So I was furious. I threw the duffel bag in the tent. I walked down the company street and saw the great big bulletin board. And right in behind the bulletin board was a big tent, which is the headquarters, which was the company headquarters, where the first sergeant and the officers and the ran the encampments were quartered for our administrative duties. And I was looking at the orders, and I couldn't find it. And apparently I had it all taken down because that was a shipment that had gone out already, so I took it off. But here's the tent next to the bulletin board, and people talking inside, and I'm about to leave, and I listened to what appeared to sound like a young captain, obviously a ring man. You know what a ring man is? It's a West Pointer. He's a young, bright West Pointer. Either that or well-trained ROTC type, but I think it was a West Pointer. And he came into he was the commanding officer of that part of the encampment, and he was reviewing the activities of the morning, because did this shipment get out? Did that shipment get out? This type of thing. So I could hear him. It says, and I could hear the captain say, "The New York shipment got out all right." I said, "Oh yes, Sergeant. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Everything fine. Took them to the depot, and they're gone." Okay. How many were they? I said, "Oh, there were 7, but and one supernumerary." I said, "Fine." Who was the supernumerary? Captain says, "Oh, the Puerto Rican." And the captain said, "Who?" He said, "The Puerto Rican was the supernumerary." The Puerto Rican, the captain says, "There's no Puerto Ricans on that order. It's a Mexican American kid from Texas. There's no Puerto Rican." "Sergeant, what'd you do?" "Sergeant, you had no authority to do that. Sergeant, he's the number 1 man. He speaks 2 languages. He was out of society. He made one of the most outstanding speeches in the state of Texas. This is the kid that OSS wants." OSS is Office of Strategic Services. The people that do the spook, what they call the spook today, behind the enemy lines, deciphering codes. And we've been shipped to New York, upstate New York, to a very critical school for training. And this sergeant took it upon himself to make me the supernumerary. And the captain was very strung out about it. Little incidents of life. And I tell my wife, "You probably saved my life." Probably saved my life. Because in those days, they needed OSS services in the worst kind of way.
The shipment that was going out, were they going to OSS?
Yes. Okay. The shipment was a selection. There's OSS said, "I need 7 people, and make sure that one of them is supernumerary. Make sure that they get on a train." Little instance of life. That was May. Early June, I finally got shipped out. to formulate a battalion. And we left Fort Dix, Joe in a cattle car, and there were nothing but park benches in the train. We drove the train took us to Mississippi, to Florida, Mississippi. Kids from New England, New Jersey, Boston, New York. I saw a lot of kids from Hell's Kitchen come through the reception center. They were bad kids. But anyhow, we arrived in Mississippi.
What is Hell's Kitchen?
Ghettos today. I mean, they were bad kids. But anyhow.
Isn't Hell's Kitchen an area of New York?
Oh, to one New York.
Yeah.
They were the ghetto kids, and they were mean. They were street kids. We arrived in Mississippi full of soot, the coal burning, and windows were open because it was hot. And God, if there's a more miserable state than Mississippi, I don't know what is. We arrived in Florida, Mississippi at the height of the summer, dusty, couldn't even get water. We went to Florida Ordnance Plant outside of Jackson, Mississippi. And we started basic training. Optical course, shooting, this type of thing. Maneuvers. I remember a fellow from New York named Ralph Hoddle. We went on a 14-mile hike one time, and he could hardly see. And he was hanging on to me. And he would call me Ram. Said, "What? My name was Ram. What to?" He never forgot it. And it was tough. So they put me in headquarters. They assigned me to headquarters. Again, they saw that I had administrative abilities to put me in headquarters. And what I did, I typed orders, bulletin, reprint. In those days, you didn't have reproduction equipment you have now. You had to cut a stencil. Then you crank it. And I apparently was pretty good at it. They kept me there, and that's where I went. That's where I was assigned. And they were brutal. In September, they allow us to go home, visit your family, because we're shipping overseas. And I went to see my mother. And I wanted to go see my girlfriend, of course, but the transportation back and forth, and I think it was too much. I didn't know how many days I was going to have, but sure enough, I went to Texas and visited with my mother. And she was very glad to see me because I had left Alice with a little cardboard suitcase, and that's all she remembers. So I was in Alice 2-3 days when the wire came in and said, "Come back to camp, come back to Mississippi." I went to Mississippi again by bus, arrived at Jackson, Mississippi, and as I was getting off the bus and getting onto the military bus, there was a big hullabaloo about another bus nearby. An altercation or words were exchanging. And what it was a celebrated incident where they wouldn't let Joe Louis on the bus unless he sat in the back. Historic.
And Joe Louis was the black boxer.
The black boxer that did so much for this country when he beat Maximilian, who was a German. He gave this country a big lift. And he was in the army. He was special services. They wouldn't let him on the bus unless he sat in the back. And he said, "I was not going to do it." In the meantime, my bus pulled out, went back to camp. And from Florida, Mississippi, we went to California. That was a long drive. And we got off at Needles, Arizona to do exercises. I'll never forget. I've been on trains not so long. We got to do exercises. I got to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What comes after 6? 7, 8. I said, "What happened? I can't think." I said, man, what's wrong? I looked around. They were all resting on the ground. The high altitude. We lost. So I was covered with the fact that I had not broken down yet. You know, but then that was a very unusual experience, and it was really sad to see them on the ground. Everybody split up. But anyhow, we landed in California and went to the Pomona Fairgrounds at that time, and we were quartered there to do some more preparation for overseas movement, more training. What we were doing, we were Ordnance-Based Automotive Battalion, a separate battalion. We were not a division. You operate on your own. And what you do, you repair half-tracks, jeeps, trucks, and what have you. And they were doing some training there. And it was there that my wife had trouble at college. She was in Ramirez College, and she went on making the usual grades. And Dr. Baker, the dean of the school, called from mom and daddy and told us that she's not doing very well. And they didn't know what was wrong with her, except that some postal clerk told her that she gets this mail from this service boy. So Mom and Joyce told her daddy, said, all I want to do is go to California. In the meantime, we were POM, preparation for OC movement. No one leaves the base. No one leaves the base. So her daddy, who was a special agent for agriculture department, agreed to let her daughter go to meet this boy, the soldier boy in California. In the meantime, he picks up the phone, and we'll show you the picture of her daddy. Beautiful spoken man. I like her daddy. He picks up the phone and calls the commanding general of the California Arizona maneuver area and said, my daughter is going to marry one of your boys. You make sure he's there. The general said, yes, sir. Yes, sir, he will be here. He will be here. I got him out of bed. The general was Alexander M. Patch, P-A-T-C-H, who was a real soldier's general. So she was coming out of by train. By that time, I had memorized all the trains leaving Chicago. The chief, the super chief, the challengers, Challenger 1, Challenger 2, El City Capitan, El Capitan in City of Los Angeles. I knew all the trains. In the meantime, I had to get permission. I went to my company commander. I was working at headquarters. Went to my company commander. His name was Edwin F. Dovsky of Chicago. He was first lieutenant. He said, Branham, well, you married the right girl? I said, yes. She thought I was marrying a local girl in California. There were many that type. Marry the guy, get the family allowance, and this type of things going on. And I said, no, Lieutenant, she's coming from East. I met her before. I know who she is. Are you in love? I said, yeah. So they gave me a 3-day pass. Now here, everybody had been sequestered for months, and here's Ram leaving for pass. So everybody said, hey, where you going? Where you going? The MP challenged me. Another guy challenged me. I got a pass. I got a pass. So I was supposed to meet her. I sent her a telegram on the train to get off at Pomona. Don't go to L.A. They made reservations at L.A. because her uncle, a relative, was a Methodist minister. He was supposed to marry her. Well, I didn't like the gentleman later. Anyhow, another story. So I sent her a telegram, but she never got it. So I'm waiting for the trains coming in at Pomona. One train comes in. No, she didn't get another train coming in. Another one. I knew them all. And here was an old senior citizen watching me all this time. This lone soldier out there waiting for the trains. And they all came. She didn't get off. and I was some kind of PO. And this old senior citizen says, "You know where she's going?" I said, "She's going to New Roswell Hotel in L.A. I'm sure." "Here's $3. Get your boss." The man was giving me money. Here's $3. And I said, "No, I don't need money." But no, you take it. You take this money. Get the bus right over there. You go. There you go meet your girlfriend. So it did. I got on the bus, went to L.A., and then she was in the hotel. I rang her room. I was so mad, so upset. I was down in the lobby. So she came down. I wouldn't even speak to her. I was sitting there, and I was some distress. "Well," I said, "my daddy called the general and said everything's going to be all right." I said, "What did you say?" He said, "Daddy called the general and said everything's going to be all right." I said, "Lady, what are you talking about? You don't call the general." I said, "Daddy did." In the meantime, the general had called my battalion. He was a 3-star general and said, "Make sure that Private Ramirez is available." I was a PFC at that time. The general wants to talk to him. "Well, go get Ram." Well, since when the company's "Ram's gone." "What do you mean he's gone?" "The general wants to talk to him." "Well, I gave him 3 day pass." The MPs, everybody's looking for me in L.A. Jeeps going up and down looking for Private Ramirez. Everybody couldn't find me. And I'm there sitting in the lobby with her, very, very down in the mouth. So here's this bellhop with a little hat. You remember the little hat, bellhop? "Paging Private Ramirez, paging Private Ramirez," going around the lobby. "Paging Private Ramirez, paging." All of a sudden, hey, wait a minute. Who you calling for? "Private Ramirez." "Are you Private Ramirez? Come here. Come to the manager's office. Then the general wants to." I said, "Oh, man, wait a minute. Don't tell me." I said, "Yes, they want to talk to you." Blah, blah, blah. The manager came out and said, "You use my phone, use my office," all this kind of stuff. Absolutely, the commander general of California, Arizona Maneuver Area. He was a guy in charge of Patton, really. Patton was training guys in the desert tanks. He was killing the troops, too. By the time they got to North Africa, they were exhausted training under Patton. Anyhow, to make a long story short, I called back to my battalion and said, "Ram, where are you? Where are you?" Says the colonel said, "What? I got 3 day pass, Colonel, right here." "You need more time. You need more time." "More time?" I said, "I don't know yet." "Well, you call us anytime you need." Well, it turned out I had a blood test. It took time by time to process the blood test. I had to go back and get more time. So I went back to my battalion, and they gave me 2 more days. And the guy said, "How in the hell can you get out of here and I can't?" And anyhow, what a story. In the meantime, playing baseball, I had chipped a tooth. And the surgeon in charge of dentistry had known about me, and he saw me leaving the camp, and he was making phone calls. "Hey, soldier, did you get your tooth fixed?" I said, "Not yet, sir." "Will you get back to dental?" I said, "Well, I'll do it later." And I thought they were going to cap it, but I ignored it. Anyhow, we got married by Reverend Rice at his home. Reverend Rice went next door, got a neighbor to come in to witness, and his wife.
What was the date?
4th of December, 1943. And while the ceremony was going on, here comes the little boy with a football under his arm and go right between us in the living room.
His son.
Uh,
His son didn't know what it was
it,
going on at that
it,
moment.
it was so cute. So we get married. And they allowed me to live off base, which is on YouTube. And we lived with the Belches on Chester Place in Pomona, California. Just a room. But it was wonderful to get out of the Army routine. Lo and behold, No sooner we got married, and they put me on special orders to come from California to Fort Washington, Maryland, to the School of Advanced Administration. And maybe that was a good thing because I could bring my wife back home since I was already in process of going overseas. And we were traveling with meal tickets. Well, meal tickets, everybody hated. So we had no money or little money. We managed
Why did they hate the meal tickets?
because you had they were like credit cards, and the people that received them had to process them to Chicago, and it would take a long time for them to get paid. This type of thing. There was only one place in America that would honor meal tickets. That was the Dearborn Railroad Station at Chicago, and outside of that, nobody else. So you couldn't eat on a train. I was embarrassed to eat on a train. Well, anyhow, we come back. We coming back from California, from Pomona, California. I'm going to Advanced School of Administration in Fort Washington, Maryland. And my wife was just counting pennies. We get to Dearborn Station, and I can't ship out. The madhouse. Mental institution. People coming this way, troops, civilians, everybody wanted to get out of there. We could get to the station master says, well, this is a military man, he's gotta go. I said, no such thing. We were stuck. I said, my God, I got a reporting day to school for Fort Washington. And you have seen in railroad stations and buses a travel aid lady, you know. So here was this little travel aid lady at Dearborn Station in Chicago. And the wife and I went up to her and told her the story. I had a report, I've scheduled, we're newlyweds. I'll be shipping out after that. Oh my God, she says. You got to go. I'll go see train master. I said, lady, I don't know. Yes, I'll go see train master. I said, well, I don't know. So she went and saw the train master. Well, train master at Chicago Dearborn Station was gone. He could divert trains, you know. I don't care what the Army said, not going to get on that rail, you know, that type of thing. He was the top banana. He was next to God in the railroad system. Lo and behold, she got us on the train. We had about $3 left, or thereabouts. We bought a can of tomato juice and some salami for the train ride from Chicago to Washington. And the rest of the money we spent getting a corsage for the little lady. And here's this little boy at the station nearby saying, hey, son, I gave him a quarter. You take this corsage. I see that lady over there in the blue dress? He said, yeah, you got to go take it to her. I'll give a quarter. He took it off. We had penned a note. Thank you so much. And we hid it. Next thing you know, here's this lady walking around the Dearborn Station crying with the corsage, looking for us. Little things of life. Beautiful. So finally we get to Washington, and she goes to visit with her sister, and she goes back to work to offer the benefits in Newark, New Jersey. So I had to report to Fort Washington for school, and it was advanced school. They threw everything in the books at you. On top of that, you had to pull guard duty, and I didn't know guard duty and fire duty. Fire duty means that you had to stoke the coal stove in the barracks all along your perimeter where you march. It was a cold winter. Oh boy, what a cold winter! And I didn't know anything about coal. First time I saw snow was walking with her in Newark, New Jersey, and I said, "What is this?" I walked in the snow. Anyhow, I didn't finish the school because they called me from California with shipping out. So by that time, I met my wife, and I'll show you the picture here. The last time I saw her was on or about March of 44. And I got on a train again with the miserable meal tickets. So we said goodbye, tearfully and heartbroken. But that was war. On the way to Chicago, I got to thinking that we're headed for the Pacific, of course. And you already heard in those days Water Canal and the Marines and Japs and Japanese control the Pacific. So I knew we were headed for dangerous waters. In the meantime, the evening meal came on the train, and I wouldn't budge because I was too embarrassed to push a meal ticket. And then that served a good meal. So here's a white-haired man said, "Come on," said, "I'll take you to the hotel." "Oh, no," I said, I don't have the money." So, "Oh, well, you be my guest." So he treated me, and I was very grateful. I didn't eat from Chicago. After that meal, leaving Chicago, I didn't eat anything until I got to California. He said, "How you doing, Ram, when you get to California?" "I'm hungry." Let me move forward. I came back from service, and I worked for chief engineers. I was working with supply section. And supply section took care of, in those days, you had to be very persnickety, took care of all the equipment, all the calculators, and the Corps of Engineers had lenses and cameras and water pressure gauges and a multitude of things. But somebody had lost a Frieden calculator. And I went up to the office to interview the circumstances. "Who's chief of this branch, our prevention branch?" "The white-haired man that fed me on the train." The world. The Frieden calculator had been stolen by the char people, put it in a gunny sack and dropped it on the second floor to the garbage truck below, and they sold it at a pawn shop. We bought it at a pawn shop. So I cleared his deck. Men cried. Bernard Castle was his name. Never forget. So we get to Pomona, California, and they're all kidding me about getting married and all kinds of stuff. And we ship out. But let me tell you a story. Before we got married, there came a time when October or November, they allow a little freedom at the base and let you go to Los Angeles. So Ralph Hoddle had, the man who hung on to me in Mississippi, always had a room. How he got a room, I don't know. But he was a member of the JC's, the Lions Club. When back home, he could get reservations. So come on, Ram, get off the base. I said, "Okay, I'll get off the base." So and he loved to bar hop. Well, I wasn't much of a drinker, but anyhow, I went with him. And we went to Hollywood, where I had served a beautiful hamburger and lots of hoes. "Here's to Joe." But anyhow, they're beautiful people, and to each his own. So finally, I said, "Hey, Ralph," I said, I can't do this. I'm not interested." "Oh, okay, Ram, you go back to the hotel, and I'll meet you there." I said, "How much money you got, Ram?" I said, "Oh, I don't know." "Well, give me some of your money." I gave him all my money. I said, "I just got enough to ride the streetcar back to the hotel." So I left him in some tavern. I went to get a streetcar, and no streetcar running. I said, "Oh boy." So I was always a very neat guy. In fact, I won many awards at school for the neatest guy, cleanest guy. And the same thing with uniform. I didn't want to get my uniform dirty. I didn't want to sit on the curb. So I'm leaning at a streetcar sign, a pole on the sidewalk, and I'm leaning against it. By that time, I realized 2 o'clock in the morning, 2:30. Blackout. The whole city is black. One little light bulb here, one there. In those days, there were a lot of pachucos. Pachucos were big suiters, big white, and they used ice picks and robbed the Marines, because the Marines come from Guadalcanal, all full of vim and vigor, and they'd rob them. Bad dudes. So I'm standing leaning on this pole. Quiet. I said, oh my God. And no streetcars running. And I could hear a noise go, shoo, 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 shoo. And I was inside the corner of the building where the side, I was hearing it coming like somebody in house shoes and little sand under. And finally, this shoe got close to the corner of the building, and I kind of leaned over there, and there was a woman. White had gone to war. In other words, white material had gone to war, so you didn't have white and civilian economy. This woman was a waitress dressed in black with just white trim. It had pockets in the front. A small woman, little on the chubby side, kind of Oriental looking. Her eyes were a little bloodshot, and she shoo up to the corner. She saw me, and she shoo up to me. Are you soldier? I said, fine. Wait for a streetcar? I said, yes. Do you know what time it is? Oh, she said, you got a long way. I said, I do? I said, okay. What time the car started running? Oh, about 5:30, 6 o'clock. Oh, I said, oh, my God. So, what are you going to do? I said, I want to wait for her. How much money you have? Oh, about 48 cents. She said, let me see it. Yeah. Showed it to her. You know, you're a nice fella. I said, oh, maybe so. No, you're a nice fella. I thought, oh, yes, sir. You come from a nice family, sir. Oh, I think so. I think I have a nice family. Your mother and father told you. Where you from? Texas. Oh, yeah. No, you're a smart boy, too. Oh, I don't know about that. No, she said, you are a smart boy. I know you're smart. You're a nice fellow. You come from nice families. Because had you resisted me, she tells me, I would have killed you. Oh? She said, yeah. She said, and I have what it takes. I said, maybe so. I wasn't about to argue. She pulls out a 32 caliber pistol she had in her pocket. I said, I guess you could have. Listen to that. 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm having this conversation. Not a soul on the street. She said, you're a bad part of town. I said, oh? You got to get out of here. I didn't know. I didn't know where it was. I didn't know that. I will give you some money. I said, oh, I don't need any money. I don't know. Boy, no, you take this money. No, I don't need any money. You take this money. She gave me $3. And I said, you go down to the next block. You turn left. It's a little hotel with a canopy and a light bulb burning on that canopy. You get under that light and don't you move. Pitch black otherwise. I said, yes, but I'm all right. No, you do as I tell you. And boy, I went catty corner on I was at the intersection with catty corner across the street. I started walking on the left side. I was on the right side previously. And she stood in the middle of the street watching me. Lo and behold, here come two bad guys out of a basement hideaway, speakeasy. And they're bad dudes, street guys. And they're going to rob me. Now, mind you, what I've just gone with this woman. And I'm about to experience this, and I saw it coming. I said, oh my God. And they broke up. One was standing, so I could walk between them. 3 o'clock in the morning. And I walked between them. And I heard him say in Spanish, Águila. Águila means eagle, means look out. One tells the other. Because the woman on the street who almost killed me was looking after me. And then she saw the woman take a few steps into the intersection. Then she saw the dude stoop. Little things in life. What little guy wore, they were pachucos, and bad Mexicans who use the ice pick and stab you and rob you. You never catch? Lord, I couldn't breathe. I got under the light at that where she told me to. I stood there. Next thing you know, here comes a cabbie out of nowhere. The woman had called. How much money you got, soldier? $3. Oh, hell. All right, get in. I got in. Drove me to the hotel. By that time, Ralph Holland, my friend, was already in the hotel, frantic. I said, "Oh, what happened to Ram?" He said, "Ram, where have you been?" I said, "Well, Ralph, it's a long story." And I told him the story. He said, "Good God, give me a drink of rum." Somebody gave me a glass like that of rum. Of rum. Little experiences of life. I go back to the base, and I had all, and then got married, went to Fort Washington, came back, and we shipped out. We going from Pomona, California to Oakland. In the meantime, I had to get in a ferry boat. You've seen ferry boats capsize and all that. This ferry boat was so loaded, merciful Father, if there's a little wave coming up, this ferry is going to sink. I was packed to the ceiling on top of back. But finally got to from Camp Storm to Oakland. We got on the boat. We managed to get there safely on the ferry boat, unloaded, got on the boat, the USS Sea Snipe, which was a converted liberty ship. The float, you could say the boat floated, but I wouldn't brag about it. It was a converted liberty ship. Over 2,000 men were going to be on that boat. And what are they playing when you get on the boat? Sentimental Journey. It was very popular. Oh my God. Was that on the boat?
What was the name of the ship?
U.S. Sea Snipe.
Sea Snipe.
Sea Snipe. SNIP. It was a converted liberty ship. It was a dog. Easter Sunday, going under the Oakland Bridge. Easter Sunday morning, we're shipping out. Easter 1944. And I feel so bad. My back was killing me, and I feel so sad leaving my wife now behind. And I was sitting cross-legged on the deck there, kind of wondering. I hear somebody crying. I'm the one supposed to cry. I look around, here's the guy crying. I looked around, everybody's crying. Guy pretty close to me from Pennsylvania. I went to war with a lot of Pennsylvania. I've never been away from home in my life. I left my wife. No, he was older than the rest of us, and he was just absolutely crying like a little baby. The USS Sea Snipe took us from Stockton, California, and I show you the map, going to New Guinea. Instead of going direct to New Guinea, unescorted, went way around Hawaii, all by the Christmas Island, 30 days to get to New Guinea, and I was sick every day of the journey, every single day. We had to execute maneuvers and test the 5-inch guns that were makeshift guns, and you fire a 5-inch gun and the steel deck would buckle. Yeah. But we were unescorted, and the Japanese still had plenty of subs in the Pacific. We landed in New Guinea, and I was the happiest man alive to get off the boat. We landed at Lae, L-A-E, for rest. And thank God for those 7-8 days. And while there, I was still so very debilitated because I couldn't eat on the boat. The boat was just slimy, full of people getting sick. And the captain who had been in the Marine service for 28 years had never seen so many sick people in his life. So one night at that rest stop, I thought I had gone crazy. With the rain coming down, we were heading for the monsoon system, and here's a guy eating right outside my tent. I thought I had cracked. I was the last bunk next to the tent, just a plain, big, large tent with nothing but cots in it. And I could hear this guy eating. I stood up with rain coming down. I said, "Edgar," I said, "you?" I said, "Yeah." He's eating. So I get out of bed. I said, and go in the ranch. I said, what in the world are you doing? He's eating Swiss steaks. I said, what are you doing? But where'd you get them? He said, well, the Air Force has a tent over there, mess tent over there. At night. But be careful, there's a guard in front. So help me, Lord, I don't know what made me do, except I'd been so hungry for 30 days I couldn't eat. I had to go down and into a ravine and up the other side of the ravine. And right as you get out of the ravine, there was a tent, all closed, all black, tied down, those flaps were down. That was the kitchen for the Air Force, who had good chow. But there was a guard, police in the area, back and forth, back and forth. He would come to there was a tank, a water tank, a truck with a tank on it for water right in front of the kitchen. And I saw the soldier. As soon as he turned around to go the other way, I went up to the tent and felt around, and I saw the flak, and I opened it up and got in it. Pitch black. And I went around feeling, God, did I stumble or something? God would hear me outside. And I felt something hot. And I go in there, and all of a sudden I feel what I felt was a big tray like this with a heavy handle. If you just imagine the biggest thing there is, that was it. And I lifted the lid like this quietly, and I stuck my head in there. I could feel the gravy. They were warm, still warm. And I fished around and I felt some steaks. I said, oh my God, if I got on my bread. I thought, wait a minute, don't get excited till you haven't got. I put the lid on the edge. I took steaks. I had them in my shirt. I wanted to find bread. I couldn't find the bread, and then afraid I was going to find great big cans of prunes and plums on the side, but I didn't want to carry that. Then I had to get out. So I had steaks all over me. So then I had to listen for the guard. And all pitch black. And I finally I had to get out of it. It was about 11 o'clock at night. And I looked up, and I didn't see him at the water cooler, water tank. And I slipped out and went down the ravine and on the other side, and guard never saw me. When I got to my tent, I woke him up, woke them all up. I said, what's going on, Ramirez? I got steaks. He said, what the hell are you talking about, steak? I said, yeah. And I pulled them out of my shirt and came to them. I said, how did you know? I said, Edgar Kalish told me about it. Edgar Kalish wouldn't share his steaks with anybody else. So the next day, they got him in the latrine and the lawn and the showers, and used a towel on him. What a towel, you pop a towel at you, makes a big lump. They got him and punished him.
Rat tail.
And that's the story that I got to New Guinea. From there, we went to Fitchhaven, which was our final destination. We landed at 3 o'clock in the morning. It was god awful frightening. You got off the ship onto ducks or amphibious boats that you're talking about, landing ship type. Only this was an amphibious boat. You had wheels on, and you get off the boat onto the duck, and the duck will propel up to the island, and it then rise on the shore and unload the troops. The problem there was that it was monsoon season. When we threw the duffel bags in, there was mud up to here. They were construction engineers, the combat engineers, or had just cleared a little edge of the water front for our encampment. Then we had to go up a hill full of mud and slippery and all, get out, and then build tents thereon, and that was our encampment. And it was some beginning. That was 1944. 50 years, 1994, I called one of my battalion mates who lived in New York. And he screamed. It was the day we landed in New Guinea. He screamed, Ram, how did you find me? I said, oh, I got ways. He was so excited. He was so pleased to hear from me. I said, Eric, do you remember the night we landed in New Guinea? He screamed. Ram, most frightening night of my life. Ram, don't even talk about it. In New Guinea, there are no monkeys. Maybe monkeys now. lots of snakes and prehistoric looking lizards. The monsoon season will crack you. Rain, 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 rain. We had guys shoot themselves in the foot and the hand just to get back. And then the proverbial jungle rock. We were always fearful of jungle rock. And we sent some people jungle rock.
What was that?
Jungle rock was just an infection you couldn't get rid of. What do you call it?
Like gangrene or?
Or fungus.
A fungus.
Yeah.
A fungus you couldn't get rid of. They gave you some blue ointment to put on there, but we shipped a lot of guys home. The meanest, toughest lieutenant we had in the battalion, stateside, as soon as we got to New Guinea, guess what happened? He cracked. He cracked. And then came time, they needed officers in the Pacific. And out of 250,000 people at Finch Haven, a good many of them applied. I had college grads from Boston, Holy Cross, and Canisius, New York College, and so I applied. I wasn't even college educated. I had the little training at Texas A&M, a high school grad. That's all. So one day, after many weeks after submitting the application, which is the balloons thing, in the jungles of New Guinea, Finch Haven, I was charged of quarters in battalion that night. And you spend the night in the headquarters, guarded. And so a bunch of guys came up to make phone calls to headquarters, F Westpac, Armed Forces of the Southwest Pacific. They want to know who was selected to go OCS. He said, well, nobody, just a handful of guys. But there's one guy here. I was writing a letter home to my wife in headquarters. They were all hugging around the table. Except one guy from your company with a funny name. I said, oh, we had a lot of Polish guys in the company. So I kept on writing. Ramirez. Ramirez made it. Ram made it. His college grad from Holy Cross in Boston College. Francis McGrail and Callahan. And I was sitting over there and said, Ram, you SOB, you made OCS. Little niches of success. I preached to my kids the whole time. Sure enough, I was one of 8 or 10 to be selected to go to OCS in Australia. By that time, we were moving from New Guinea to the Philippines, preparation to invade Japan. Then they said, reapply again when you get to the Philippines. I said, hell no, I'm not going to do it. But I want to get home. I could have been in office. The bomb was dropped. New Guinea was terrible. Philippines were terrible too. All jungles too. The bomb was dropped on the 6th day of August at Nagasaki. Or Hiroshima, Nagasaki on the 9th. And all before that time, in the Philippines, the month of July, all you could hear was cooks, clerks, and bakers. Cooks, clerks, and bakers. That meant that they needed men. We'd later learn that they needed 1 million men. It was a 10-month engagement to invade Japan. It would have cost us 600,000 casualties. It had been the most bloody battle in the history of our nation. And when we captured the Japanese generals, they said, yes, we were going to defend it to the very end. They had trained kids with dynamite sacks. They had hundreds of pleasure boats loaded with dynamite. And worst of all, they had 2,000 kamikaze planes in reserve. Worse than that is what I told them. And now it comes out. They were going to gas us too. They were going to use chemical warfare on. And we were not prepared for it. Not that I know. We had mass, but that would have been nothing. So we came within days of invading Japan. Like I told you on the telephone the other day when the American leader asked me, and I got emotional. I was the last one to speak. The reason I get emotional, but where were you, VJ Day, is because the invasion of Japan will have involved me, and I did just like this, me and 3 brothers. So all I want when the World War II, National World War II Memorial is constructed, I want somewhere in there that I not be recorded, but my mother's name. That's all I ask. I came back from the service. It was a glorious, glorious time. I was in charge of troop train coming back away to Fort Meade. I was discharged at Fort Meade. And in 1946, I went to work for the Office of Chief Engineers. And there was a bias against returning servicemen, people who, 4F, people who didn't qualify. There was a bias. So they demoted me from grade 4 to grade 3. I was just, my first job with the government was making $1,440 a year. Well, and then they promoted me before I went to service to grade 4, which is 1620. I came back, worked with chief engineer, which is a miserable place to work because they're very elitist. And I got demoted to grade 3, and everybody was making gobs of money selling equipment on the outside because consumer goods had been non-existent, and I wouldn't do it. I took the grade reduction and stayed in the service. Next thing I know, I got promoted to grade 5 as chief of the supply section. Then one day, they called me in and they said, Mr. Ramirez, the chief of the administrative division called me in and said, we've got a serious problem. We need your help. The classified section and chief engineers was one classified section, like no other service in the country. They control literally, because they had map production capability also. All the classified documents in the Army came in there. I mean, this was frightening, nerve-wracking experience to handle top secret day in and day out. You couldn't pick up a piece of paper like this. You had to pick it up, make sure that there's a receipt, and who got it. You had to follow. It was the most miserable job I ever had. And they detailed me there to correct the situation. I had lost a top secret document. And I didn't like the job, but we found the top secret document. I lasted, I worked there about 6 days, and the meanest woman that ever worked for the government, Mrs. Frances Hurley, I met a woman who everybody was afraid of because she was a chief clerk. I had 33 years experience with the government. She gave me the most glowing commendation I ever read. She said I was, without a doubt, a young man with the greatest executive potential of anybody she'd seen in her 33 years service. And a man I had known named Bill Kendall always said, Joe, if I have a job for you, you got it. Sure enough. No sooner I was finished with the classified section fiasco, he called me and had a job, 2-grade promotion, to work in industrial base of a nation type of project endeavor. Mobilization planning, because you got to understand the 50s, 60s. The Cold War was in existence. We were concerned that the industrial base could be damaged, and how much damage would it do if a bomb fell here, a bomb fell there? It was something else.
Almost out of
That's
time.
it?
Yeah, almost out of time on this one.
Okay.
When we were talking about the World War II experiences, what were your duties actually when you were in New Zealand? And
I worked in headquarters, the battalion headquarters, and what I did, I was still in the publication side of it. I published all the orders, all the bulletins. I prepared table of organization and equipment, which is very difficult to do. That is to reproduce them because they're very small, typed in a little booklet. And I did several and nice pieces of work in that regard. But it was no hazardous duty. I mean, I wasn't in combat. No one was in combat. Just the existence in the jungles was bad enough.
sure,
And then you didn't have in a civilization. There were a couple of sailors one time, all dressed in white, jumped off a boat and going to go to town and have a ball. And we met them in a muddy road on the way to headquarters. We were going to pick up a payroll. And I told the sergeant, stop the chief, see what's going on here. And I asked the sailors, what's the problem? What you doing? See them, mud, they're all in dress with whites. They said, where's the action, man? I said, action? Well, why don't you wait a little while? We're going to go to the Philippines. Who's in some action? No, where's the city? Where's the city? I said, you got it. He said, what do you mean? This is it. I don't know, but it was funny. I was in headquarters. We were not in combat. Very fortunately, we were behind the lines. We had Japanese stragglers come in during the night all the time. They're looking for food. They would generally went to the mess hall, garbage and everything else. And then for a while, we had a little problem with the natives too, because they realized the mess hall was a place to get food. One particular night, the mess sergeant gave him a can of spam. He just took a cleaver, opened it up, and gave it to the native. So what does the native do? He comes over to my tent, right outside my tent while it was raining, and I'm sleeping, and I hear the I open my eyes, I see this native right 6 inches, 12 inches away from my face, and I scream, ah! Woke up the whole company. But the natives were really natives. I mean, they got the understanding in 1942. Now they're very modernized, and the missionaries have done a lot of work with them. But you didn't fool around with the natives too much for disease purposes, and we had one soldier was decapitated because he went into the village trying to do hanky panky with the natives, and I guess the chief just took care of him.
Mm.
But otherwise, we didn't fool with the natives. But we were in no real danger that you were always apprehensive, but there was no such thing as a Japanese coming into your area with armed and do battle. We had a lot of harassment by Japanese bombers way up high, get you out of bed 11 o'clock at night just to upset the morale and get you out of sequence. You lose sleep, this type of thing. But after a while, we ignored the Betty Bomber, which we call a Betty Bomber. But I was very fortunate. I came very close, though, to participate in the invasion of Japan, and this is very, very close. So I thank the mighty Lord and Harry Truman for that, because I think it actually saved some of the Ramirez's, and not all of
When did you go to the Philippines?
them. We went to the Philippines about May of 45, and I didn't leave there until January of 46 and came back home.
What town were you in the Philippines? Were you in Luzon or?
Right outside Manila.
Oh, okay.
And the name of the place was Tacloban, I think. We were outside Manila in the Philippines. But the history beside of the Philippines is the fact that MacArthur was from the Philippines, and he got driven out by the Japanese. So MacArthur wanted to get back to the Philippines because he had promised, "I shall return," which he did. And he and he was held in high regard by the Filipinos, and so was held in high regard by the Japanese, because the Japanese respect senior hood, and they respect MacArthur as far as that goes. But MacArthur was concerned that the Japanese general that came in and committed all the atrocities they were committed after they left, that he be punished. But I don't think it ever happened. I think yes, I guess he was eventually punished. But the point is that this Japanese general that invaded the Philippines and drove the Americans out, and then the trek to Bataan, all that sad commentary. Well, in fact, this Japanese general was a great big man. I want to say Yamashita, but he really didn't have that much to do with the atrocities. It was actually the Japanese operation of the Philippines was conducted by an admiral in a warship right outside the bay. The Japanese general, well, he had to take care of the ground troops and all of that, and he was just a good army general. But that was after, that was before I came to the Philippines. That had all transpired before. But the campaign in the Pacific was so huge. You're talking about thousands of miles of water. And the Japanese were terribly entrenched. And if you cut it off, let me get the map and let me show you. Okay.
Right.
We'll do a shot of that too.
What does it say? It shows all the orange, all Japanese controls. I was right there in Fitzhaven. And the idea the Japanese wanted to take Port Moresby, and then they can take Australia.
Correct.
And that's how close it came. Admiral Nimitz, the commander of the naval forces, was really fighting an uphill battle. It was a horrendous handicap. The Japanese were tremendously well prepared. They had aircraft carriers twice to our number, had troops all over the place. They had troops going over the high ranges of New Guinea coming to Port Moresby. The concern that the Americans had was the Japanese would come in here through the water and land at Port Moresby. That's it. And this is when they were intercepted up in here by Admiral Nimitz. And then from there, they went on. MacArthur went Allen jumping this way because he wanted to get to Philippines to save face more than, and then among other things, because he left the Philippines in a lurch. And so the war in the Pacific just staggers your imagination and the scope and the dangers and the gambles they took. The most important thing that ever happened in the Pacific War was that a commander named Rockford decoded the Japanese transmission.
When was that?
From 1942 on. I think he was a brilliant man who was treated very shabbily after the war, because Nimitz says, you give that information to me first. If it pertains to my theater, don't you send it to Washington first. Send it to me. I got men in danger. And he did. He provided Nimitz information ahead of time, and he was successful with that information. He knew how many carriers the Japanese had. He knew what the movements were. This man, Rockford, was a brilliant intelligence officer. And that was a significant input into the war in the Pacific. And Nimitz gave him credit for it, and all the commanders gave him credit for it, but apparently somebody in Washington had it in for this guy because he violated orders. He didn't go through channels. And the same thing happened in Japan and in Pearl Harbor. Had Pearl Harbor had the information, we had enough information that the Japanese were going to do the attack, but it got lost in the mail. It got lost between communications here and the Pearl Harbor. But you got to understand that even Vietnam had civilization, while the people that fought in those jungles over here have godforsaken land. I heard a Marine say the same thing I said when I landed. He said, "What a godforsaken place to die in," and this is all that people talk about. I mean, you're apprehensive, you're afraid. There's no such thing as a brave soul in combat. If he's brave, he's nuts. Everybody fears the situation. The war is hell. Let's put it that way, unequivocally. And look at the men that came back so disturbed, mentally, physically, and otherwise, and yet we cannot erect a national World War II memorial after 50 years. What a crime! What an insult! We are the greatest country in the face of the earth. Nobody's in second place. We're under the greatest system in the world, not a perfect system, but it's the greatest system on the face of the earth. And yet, we quickly forget those individuals who gave so very much. Not only did they save the world, they literally reconstituted the world. Those Depression kids did incredible things when they came home in the 50s. Absolutely incredible. And for us to ignore those that gave so much, those that gave their dear-born children, the Gold Star mothers, why can't we stop and say thank you? And that's all they want. And what's the urgency about it? Because we're disappearing by the hundreds every day. And we cannot do that. Great proclamations. The surplus money is people's money. Okay, Mr. President, let's take some of the surplus money and let's get this memorial constructed before we're all gone. Shameful. Shameful. Absolutely shameful. Now they're fussing over the site, the architecture design. I think it can improve, but it's just absolutely a criminal subject. The most important thing left from the 20th century, this. Unfinished business, the World War II memorial. All the others have memorials. This was not a police action. This was an effort by the total country. Men, women, and children at the whole front were beautiful, fantastic. Grant you, we never experienced what the rest of the world experienced. Bombardment of our country. The Japanese had some balloons with dynamite and explosives that were particularly well guided. Oh yeah, they had submarines that landed troops on the West Coast. The Germans had subs that landed people in North Carolina and New Jersey. So, but they were isolated. They were small terrorist and subterfuge and undermining of the system in small quantities that never were effective. The Germans were trying to kill President Roosevelt. There's a book out called Pursuit. Read it. They had German agents who chasing Roosevelt all over the country, but never got it because they figured that if they get Roosevelt, there certainly will be a tremendous psychological blow to this country because Roosevelt was supreme. They took us out of the Depression. We really didn't get out of the Depression until after the war. So you're talking about a generation that gave their utmost. Now, we're still very fortunate. We're still the great country. We lost 700,000 men, 72,000 still missing in action. That's nothing. The Russians lost 21 million. The Germans likewise. And who did it? The good old farm boys and caddies and mechanics and service station attendants and newsboys and the little inconsequential individual in America when it comes to talking about the guys from Princeton and Harvard. They participated also, but it's the little guy that carried the load, the grunt, the ground truth. And not taken away from the Air Force or the Navy or anyone else, but the fact is that the man on the ground still was essential, still is essential. The need now today is to move into mechanized equipment. I've been saying it for 20, 30 years. I want an airplane to go over there and bomb them. That's okay, but not involve a human being. And we have the technology to do it. The technology for the national defense missile system, the technology is not here. We're going to spend billions and billions of dollars, and you cannot stop all missiles. If a missile fell of the caliber that I have, which are now megaton, if a missile fell in the desert of the west, or southwest here, there'd be pandemonium all over this country. If a missile fell in an industrial area or metropolitan area, there'd be panic. Which just one. It staggers imagination. The idea of going into war, exchanging nuclear devices, is absolutely staggering imagination. If anyone knew what you're talking about, there's an Air Force general, I think his name is Butler, who was in the silos where the missiles are held up in the West, and he wrote quite a book on this that is absolutely frightening to comprehend what it's about. Therefore, the missile crisis with Cuba in October of '62 was frightening time, absolutely frightening. And according to Khrushchev's son, he said that his daddy was really trying to bluff. What a terrible thing to do, play with nuclear system. And he said he was trying to bluff the United States because ultimately Russia did not have as many missiles as the United States had. Yeah. And he finally backed off. And I think that Kennedy and his staff did a marvelous job of keeping it from going any further because it would have been the end of mankind. An accident could be something frightening. They got one in the water outside of Atlanta, somewhere in Georgia, trying to hope to raise that bomb that fell. And then you're talking about the radioactive fallout. The immediate destruction is one thing, but the contamination is something else. We got half of Russia contaminated. And you know what Russia's doing? They'll tell you, Sweden, Norway, France, and send me all your hazardous material. I'll take it for $1 billion a load. And they throw it where they're throwing all the stuff that came out of Grenoble and all of that. Criminal. You're devastating miles and hundreds of miles. They will never be inhabited. There's no such thing as a living animal living. And this is what's so frightening about a nuclear exchange. Of course, I want a defense system, but I don't think the one system they will cover. Why? You have terrorists out there that got a little package this big that can blow the Empire State Building. We have more problems right now with international terrorism and internal terrorism than any problem we have in this country, drugs notwithstanding. And there are people working day and night about that. They just caught 7 people up in L.A., I think. So we're still living in very troubled times. Our domestic problems and social problems are still here, but the terrorist problem is incredible. It staggers the imagination, again, that people did not understand. We live in the greatest country in the face of the earth, yet we have these militants and skinheads willing to do away with communities and people. I cannot believe that we have dropped that low. Moral-wise, international, worldwide, we're losing it. Why? Because we have 1,300,000 people incarcerated. Shameful. The rest of the world, when those incarcerated individuals, some have made just a simple mistake, probably will never commit a false act in the rest of their lives. I guarantee you 70% can be contributing American citizens when they get out of jail. So what do? We cut down their citizenship privileges. They can no longer vote. They can no longer vote. So the rest of the world does not do that. The rest of the world, you commit the crime, you pay the time, go make the best you can and symbols. But we don't. We deprive. On top of that, we kill them as fast as we can get them in jail,
Especially in Texas.
especially in Texas. And the world's aghast. Moral America, how can you do that? You turn your image apart. You think that's bad? They're dying by the hundreds of thousands of AIDS in Africa, and the rich countries are not doing a damn thing. Moral responsibility, we ought to have it. All they say, if the rich countries of the world get together, they can help Africa and get it healthy again. Cost money? Yes, who cares? Lives are expendable over there, but not in America. Let's help those countries, and we can do it. We can do it. It gets to be a very sensitive subject, and it gets, unfortunately, very political. Very political. But I am a very proud American, without getting to be a blatant idiot in the open. But I'm very proud, and I've done some wonderful things. I went from the chief engineer to chief of transportation. The chief engineers, you have to dot every I and cross every T. Days gone by, the chief engineers got the best graduates out of West Point, so they're very elitist. They've done a lot of crazy stuff with rivers and harbors, but it's all political. But the actual military aspect of the services is hard to beat. The Army is possibly the most democratic institution in America, and was the forerunner. In fact, Truman integrated the Army. But so I went from chief of engineers to chief of transportation. A man came to my office and he told us, Joe said, I want you to know that I told my bosses down the hall, the chief of transportation, that you were the only man that could do my job. I'm quitting. I'm leaving the government service. I said, well, wife, what makes you think I can do it? No question. So they invited me for a cup of coffee, and I said, I don't drink coffee. Well, anyhow, they said, we threw your name in the skillet, and I think they want you. They promoted me to grade 12, from grade 11 to grade 12. And that was a good promotion. Lord, merciful Father, they couldn't promote me fast enough after I got away from the chief engineers. I went to 12, and they couldn't understand. I went to 13. And then the colonel saw me, the name Bill Kincaid, and said, Joe, said, you're my man. I want you to set up this office. I said, you already got started in industrial section? And set up industrial branch. And he went to personnel, said, I want this man promoted. And told the chief of personnel, when you have some doubt about it, you've been towards the individual, not against him. You promote this man. Boom! I got a grade 14 on her now. Huge grade. That's a great word. And chief of industrial branch and chief of transportation. Lord, merciful Father. Guess what's going to happen in Corpus Christi? The people who won't harm in Corpus Christi. The Army was going to establish an Army depot at the Naval Air Station inside the Naval Air Station in Corpus Christi called a RADMAC. I'm one of the key movers of creation of the Army base at inside the Naval Air Station in Corpus Christi. What a small world. I call it the Army Aviation Maintenance Center. Still stands today. Started in 1962. I was chief of industrial branch for chief of transportation. We had a lot to do with it because we were going to set up a repair activity for helicopters. The chief of transportation was a young, vibrant corps, full of young, beautiful guys. And the commanding general was a three-star general, Frank S. Bessel, was a very nervous man, but he was a go-getter. He was the youngest brigadier general ever in the history of the Army. He was made a general officer in Europe because he set up the railroad system in Europe, Army-wise. And he says, move out, get the job done. Just keep a high batting average. Now, that may sound shallow to you in elementary, but that is big responsibilities to those key individuals. So when John Young, a congressman from Texas, got word around, and they came to me, and I said, well, look, I said, I'm a civil servant employee. I can't play politics too much. I said, I work for the government. He said, Joe said, we need you. So between John Young, myself, and General Losey, who was the first commandant of the arm at a RADMAC in Corpus Christi, you check it out. Go down there and get some stories also. And lo and behold, we set it up and still operate today. No sooner that activity started, and all the technical services, what they call technical services of the Army, the chief of engineers, the quartermaster, the signal corps, the ordnance corps, and the transportation corps, and other peripheries, all disbanded and became the Army Materiel Command. The Army Materiel Command are the people that supply all the equipment for the Army, from guns up. Every piece of equipment you ever seen, which is a big responsibility. The reason for the merger was to avoid duplication. Then you have a amalgamation of all kind of people, coming in there, and you're trying to make it work. All right. When this took place and the Corps no longer existed and became the Army Materiel Command, within the Army Materiel Command, they made project managers. Project manager concept. The project manager concept was developed by a Navy man called Bradford or Rayburn, is Navy admiral. And the principle of a system of management is this. You find the best individual you can find, man, woman, either way, and surround him with the best people you can get him. Give him the responsibility, the authority, and the accountability, which is unheard of in government service. You always have layers and layers and layers of approvals. This cut across all lines, but you better be able to do the job. For instance, Sharon can't work that day. You better make sure that Sharon's job is done, but somebody else will do it yourself. I worked around the clock. So they hired me as the chief of procurement and production, actually chief of plans and programs for the Navy chief program. I was principally chief of procurement and production for the project manager for aircraft weapons. I bought and controlled and distributed all the armament you have ever seen or your mom and dad have ever seen that was used on helicopters from 1964 to 1969. I worked day and night. And want to know why are you so dedicated? Because I know what's going on in Vietnam. I've been in the jungle. I know. And then it's easy. You're going to arm the helicopter? Yes. But you got to understand the seriousness of arming a helicopter. If you put a piece of equipment on a helicopter, the aerodynamics go to pop. So you have to test it. And you're dealing with a dangerous thing, a weapon. You cannot afford that weapon to explode, for instance, when you get it. So what I had done when I became chief of procurement production for Project Management Aircraft Weapons, I had guns that I bought So I wanted Corpus Christi to all haul that helicopter and ready with the guns, so that when it left Corpus Christi for the southeast for the war, that helicopter was complete and not just a helicopter repairing. So I went to Texarkana Army Depot and I told them what I was going to do. They had a little something to do with the machine guns, and I went to Corpus Christi and I laid down. I had a big meeting with them down there, and we broke for coffee at about 10:30 that morning after being in session for about 5 hours. And I had taken one of my fellows from Washington who had worked at Corpus before at the Navy. I hired him as a quality control man, and we had a big meeting. And I went and get a Coke or some kind of drink coffee. I didn't want a Coke. And the chief man out of Corpus Christi asked my traveling companion, Hank Quarterman, said, "Who is this guy Ramirez?" He said, "He's my boss." "Is your boss?" "Is he?" "He's the smartest SOB that ever came out of Washington. He knows more about what's going on than anyone ever came into the camp." In the meantime, I toured the line. It's just like aircraft production, assembly line. I toured the line. I was looking for a cousin I never met. First cousin. I found him, all greasy because he's doing transmissions, overhauling transmission, which is the guts of the helicopter. And I said, he was shocked because I was in a suit. He was shocked. You know, he thought it was FBI or IRS. And I told him who I was, and his eyes get bigger and bigger and bigger. He said, "You're my primo? You're my cousin?" I said, "Yeah." And the individual in charge of that section was a woman. And I told him, I said, "Get your ass out of here and go to school. Tell him that you want to go to school." So when I left touring the area and went back to the meeting, the woman supervisor quickly ran to him and said, "What did the man say? What did the man from Washington say?" "Well, he wants me to go to school." Next thing you know, they sent him to school. So that was a great piece of accomplishment by some very brilliant people in the Army. And by using the project manager concept, it was not easy. It was very painful because you had to be on your toes all the time. I was shipping from the factories all the major subordinate commands in the field. We had a weapons command in Rock Hollow, Illinois. We had a missile command in Huntsville, Alabama. We had electronics command in Fort Mama, New Jersey. But any component I shipped by air to Vietnam. I never took a chance. I think I sent some rocket launches one time but not many. But I shipped everything out of by air, and our shipping point was Travis Air Force Base in California. Mm-hmm. So one day I worked in an office door closed. And I was sitting here, my deputy was over here. Harry Steinberg was a very meticulous engineer, very meticulous man, but after a while it became a burden because it took so long, but he was very loyal and good hard worker. And I was sitting there one day just thinking, and he pulls up his steno pad. I always use a steno pad to record it. That "Yes, Amos, what you thinking now?" He said, "Harry," I said, "we got a shipment so-and-so going out of Travis." "Yeah, yeah." "Harry, I want somebody to tell me that shipment got on board." "Oh, we can call Pat Flaherty." Now listen to this. Pat Flaherty was a senior civilian, possibly retired military, who was in the Air for the commanding general as a troubleshooter worldwide. He can go in theater, and if it's a bottleneck, he was supposed to try to improve, cut through the bottleneck, improve it, help him out, whatever you do. And if he sees anything wrong, should be reported, he'd report it to higher headquarters, which means the colonels and generals would shake if Pat Flaherty came up there. He was a super grade, a grade 16, higher than I. But his job was troubleshooting. So my assistant said, "We can get Pat Flaherty to check that out." Flaherty, and they had to check on him. I said, okay, whatever you do, you think it's not below his dick, below his surface? Says, no, he's in the area. So Harris Donverb spent the night, Friday night, and contacted Flaherty, and they were doing Coleman's Sunday. I headed it off Saturday because my yard had grown and I needed to mow it. So I was mowing the yard, and the phone rang. My wife answered, said, somebody for you, urgent. I said, okay. And I got on the line and I said, Mr. Ramirez says, yes, sir. This Pat Flaherty, yes, sir. So we can't say, hey, let me have the camera. You know, say things like that on the phone. There's this war going on. He said, concerning shipment, Mr. Ramirez, he said, didn't say what it was. He said, yes, sir. Everything okay? It's all right, sir. I said, Mr. Flaherty, let me show. I'm talking to a senior man. And I'm saying, oh, you're sure, Mr. Flaherty? Mr. Ramirez, I wouldn't be calling you. Mr. Flaherty, let me ask you one more time. Are you sure? Did you actually see that package get on the plane? I just say that, but who knew what it meant? Yes, sir. All right, sir. He hung up. That's what the verification I needed. I was sending some very critical grenade launchers. You put them in the nose of the helicopter and you should boom, 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 and then go out there, boom, blow it. Very effective weapon. And they had a hard time getting out of test evaluation. Okay. One day, my wife's daddy was in Florida, very sick. I said, go, honey. Go see your daddy. So she gets to National Airport, a connecting flight, going through Washington, going south. And she's getting on the plane, putting her stuff away. And here's a very solicitous individual, very much of a gentleman, putting on a big show. And she was taking the outside. We always sit on the outside seat, aisle seat. And she finally settled down, strapped up, and plane started. Oh, I'm Pat Flaherty. I said, I'm Joseph Ramirez. And she said, I'm Pat Flaherty. You say your name is Ramirez? I said, yes. Are you related by any chance to a fellow named Joe Ramirez? He said, yes. He's my husband. This man said, now mind you, he's a senior civil servant, the most decorated civilian in the history of the Department of Defense. He said, I want you to know, Ms. Ramirez, that your husband is the most important, most valuable servant I've ever met. He's a brilliant, able, dedicated man. Perfect strange. What a world. What a world. All those things I tell you the gospel truth, and this is the gospel truth you've recited. What a world. I got sick, old injuries. I had operated. I had this removed. No sooner I get this removed, come back, I was hurting so badly. I got promoted to grade 15. That's the highest civil service grade at the time. And in the meantime, they had sent me out to speak at Pueblo, Colorado. And then I spoke at Huntington, West Virginia, Tri-State Management. Words could not describe. Words could not describe. I was cited to be possibly one of the most tremendous public speakers in America. In West Virginia and Pueblo, Colorado. I mean, acclaimed by colonels who were ordered to attend this meeting, Association of the United States Army, and they begrudgingly went. And one colonel who was sitting at a table with a lady friend that I knew was not interested in Mr. Ramirez. He turned around right there. And next thing you know, he turns around and said, who's this guy? And the lady said, you met him today. But he was so arrogant. He's a West Pointer. put it in the gong, you know. He said, "Good God, it was." Who was the first one to run up and congratulate me? This colonel. He said, "Mister, you are so speak. I speak from right here." I was a reserve officer. In May of 1948, I'm moving over the platform a little bit here. In 1948, the Army and the war and the services had deactivated, so it needed officers badly. A colonel came up to me and said, "Joe, you ought to go interview." They were interviewing people to commission them. I said, "What are you talking about? I'm not a college grad. I think they don't have to be college. You go and go." So I was interviewed here in Washington. Not only was I interviewed, I was right off the bat, made a second lieutenant on an interview. And then I joined the National Guard, and that kept me from going to Korea. I was commissioned on an interview. No ROTC, no OCS, no West Point, just talk and appearance. Like they did in New Guinea, they recognized me. And the record of New Guinea is right in my closet that the board said I recommend Sergeant Ramirez with the board recommendation of confidence. Check mark. Now, this in Washington, fortunately, the critical people in Washington said this man is officer material. I joined the National Guard after the reserves were difficult because they're all full of colonels. I was just a lieutenant, and I learned a lot with the National Guard. I led the troops through 2 Eisenhower inaugural parades. I was commanding officer, headquarters battery, 340th Artillery, defensive of the nation, Nike Ajax missile. I was headquarters. So I was one of the leading troops down in 2 Eisenhower parades. They're pictures somewhere. All right. All of a sudden, McNamara, the Secretary of Defense, says, "No one can be a reserve officer and a key federal employee too." Next thing I know, he's got me on orders as an inactive reserves. McNamara said this: "If you have a key federal job and the war breaks out, you're not going to go to war. You're too vital to defense in your civil position." What he never understood was the fact that as a civil servant, I may change jobs. Stupid. I even went on active duty 2 weeks. 2 weeks active duty at my own expense, just to keep active and to earn 50 points per year, which is 50 points will give you a retirement year. I had already completed a 4-phase course at Fort Lee Logistics Management Center. Every year you go for 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks. I completed. As a captain, I wasn't even supposed to be in the school. It was only for field grade and higher. I was majors and higher. As a captain, they allowed me in. I finished it. And then the 5th year, they said, "Come back and teach." At Fort Lee, the academy, they come down and said, "You come back and teach." And I did at my own expense. They gave me the driest subject in the face of the earth: plans, programs, and the budget. And what I did, I prepared myself 90 hours worth. And I took a simple item of equipment, say a Jeep, and took that Jeep from conception into laboratories, and you bring it out, and you plan and budget for it, you bring it out, and you have it produced, limited quantity, wait, don't buy too many, does test it first, and then go into quantity production, and go into big, and then it's sent to the troops, and all the steps that happens, all connected to plans, programs, and the budget, and they never seen anything like it in their lives. I was speaking with a small platform and auditorium full of field grade officers, majors and higher, most of them colonels from all over the United States, without pay. Without pay. No one does that. When I finished this presentation, they rushed me. One thing I heard. And I was struggling with this because I had a chain, you know. I had butcher shot paper, I had view graphs, I had pencil sketches and everything on a little platform and a big auditorium. And this colonel came out. "Wait, I'm going to speak first." This colonel. "Captain," I said, "Yes, sir." And I was juggling. "My name is Colonel Pickett." Well, I could see it. Pickett had a name. Everybody had a name. "Yes, sir." "Well, I want you to know who I am." I said, "Yes, sir." Captain, I'm a professional scholar. I said, yes, sir. I'm dean at the University of Oklahoma. I said, yes, sir. And I'm still struggling with it. I've studied in Cambridge. I said, yes, sir. He said, I want you to know, Captain, that last hour and a half presentation is the greatest presentation I've heard in my life. Then I really was struggling with my chain. I said, Colonel, that's pretty nice. I said, you're enthusiastic? You're humorous? You know your subject matter? And you're well prepared. Thank you, sir. 90 hours worth. Little did he know I wasn't getting paid for. Little things in life you got to give. I'm going to send you the message that I sent my kids about where I was. Just said, okay. They all gave me profuse. They interviewed them after the course was over, and they had to comment down. The commandant asked the guys from all over America, what do you think about reserve officers teaching? They said, well, if you like the captain, you can get them all reserve officers. The commandant knew me. What captain? That's Captain Ramirez. He said, no kid? I said, yeah. You have somebody teach like Captain Ramirez, you're going to get all reserve officers. Let me finish. I finally get my chain undone. And the last guy that comes to say something nice is a colonel from California. Every year by the new caddy, gets away from the family, gets all the way across the country, has the ball, he's rich, and I knew it. I knew who he was. He puts his hand on his pants like this. Captain, yeah, Colonel. Hot damn you, Captain. I said, yes, sir. What's the problem? He said, damn it, Captain, I never sat on the edge of a chair to hear what a person's going to say next like I have this last hour and a half. Damn, Captain, you're good. He said, steak dinner on me tonight. Anything you want. You tell him to put it on my ticket. And it was great moments without pay. Without pay. Hey, breathe. Money makes you happy? Nah. My wife can write all the checks she wants. We have no problem with money. Sell me your house. I told my son, so me, I paid him pin money. I took a mortgage on this house, $100,000. Paid the mortgage on his house. His house is clear. Doesn't pay rent, no taxes, no nothing. Yep. Next time you come in town, we'll go see the house. Or a 5-acre tract. He built it. It's his house. I didn't build his house. Creative. I want to show you a little bit, give a quick story in my little office. Why? I can't help my kids when I'm gone. I cannot do it. So long as you try to help yourself and you're a striver and you're leading a good life, I will help you. Illiterates. You ought to see what I did for an illiterate. Mama cried. She said, Danny, I loaned him money. He said, you're so beautiful the way you handle it. And she kept on bragging. Well, I guess I did all right. I said, you don't want to tear down the person who is already down. So I said, well, maybe I did all right. Consider he'll never pay me. I said, what'd you say? He'll never pay me. He never did. More money than you wish to entertain, I gave him. You know why? I sure know how to go to the bank and I make application for a loan because I turned him down. He was a second Genesis individual, confined. He had a problem with drugs, but he was clean as a whistle. You know why? Because I know in my heart that he's a contributing American citizen out there. I know where it did. He was washing trucks. You know the trucks that deliver the groceries to the big stores? They need to be washed and cleaned. He was good. They paid him $12 an hour. I said, don't you ever lose that job. And then he wanted to be something else, and I helped him with that. But ministers, there's one in Corpus Christi. I gave him $200, $300, $250. Gave him $200 pair of shoes, somebody that I had bought one time. I slipped $300 on shoes. The next time he called me, I said, Mr. Ramirez, I can no longer live in Alice. The church cannot sustain me. Had 3 kids and 1 on the way. he met me in May of 1980. I was down at the Valley because they wanted to see a real honest man in America, and I went down, and then my nephew said, "Yes, I know an honest man." My uncle was. I went down to Altair's, another store. But anyhow, let me continue with the minister. He came to this house one time, and I gave him $50. I gave his traveling companion $40. You know, they're poor people. They're small churches. My mother was very fond of this young minister because no one wanted the church. It was so downtrodden, so low church, you know. And sure enough, he was a handsome family, had 3 kids like Dudley. I got subscriptions for him for the Smithsonian magazines. You know what the 12-year-old did? The 12-year-old did a television announcement on the joy of reading. Contributed American citizens. He called me one day, his daddy, the minister, said, "I'm down. I need to move my family to Corpus." I said, "Reverend, you're going to need $400 minimum for a deposit or your rental of the house. Nobody's going to rent you without a deposit. And you need another $400 more." So I'll send him $1,000. I loaned him $1,000 this time. And he wrote me a long letter on it. I got it. I won't make this $1,000 go as far as I'll pay you. They never paid it, but that's all right. Because I know that down he'll pay back. He's a driven American citizen. I don't even give a tinker's damn what church he belongs to, so long as he is not abusing others. I do not care. We need all the help we can get in this country. I don't know, Assembly of God, Pentecostals, or Church of Church of Listen would be Mormon, not Mormon. Mormons don't need help, they say. But anyhow, so this is what life is all about. And I preach to my kids little niches of success. When you accomplish things, what a crime it is. What an incredible crime it is, an abuse. When a little boy, a little girl finally learns to tie their shoes and comes so proud to tell mom and daddy that they've learned to, and for the mom and daddy not to recognize this and praise the child. What a crime. What a crime. You know what happens to that child? And from there he starts growing with misgivings. What's he used to or appreciate? The famous math teacher in California, Escalante. Fantastic. I use it too. "Oh, Johnny, you only got 3 out of 5 right. That's wonderful, Johnny. Next time you get them all right. You make 5 out of 5, Johnny." Not say, "Why couldn't you get 5? Simple math." What fools will mortals be? What fools will mortals be? Greatest human resources in America. You know what they are? The women, folks. How dare you, America? How dare you, America, to say women are nobody? How dare you? How dare you say the women are no good because they get sick? How dare you say they're emotionally unreliable? How dare you to say that, America? How dare you to say that about all the mothers of America? How dare you to say it about my mother? I know there's thousands of other mothers. We do it every single day for 500 years or more. Man has been abusing women. You say I'm a pro-lib? I respect women. Ultimate. Yep. Some guy was poo-pooing women one day. "Oh, Chopper, you don't know about women." I said, "Yeah, well, let me help you out. You know, Bill, there's some women that demonstrate broomstick not only in October, but November, December." Oh, he liked that, you know. He was, oh, yeah, he felt with it. And now you want me to tell you what men do? "Oh, I don't care about that. That's what you want me to tell you? What women, men been doing to women?" No, he didn't want to hear that. What fools we mortals be. What fools. I come from a little town called Alice, Alice. I'll show you the cap. I told my brothers, send me a cap from Alice, his shirt. So it says Alice, Municipal Golf Course. But the Municipal Golf Course was small letters and wore off. I was playing golf with a young guy. And we come into the clubhouse. I could tell doing a round that he was kind of unhappy with me for one reason. We came to the clubhouse and he was drinking my beer. I bought this your beer. I sip. I don't drink it anymore. I drink at home one time, but I got to be at home after a hot summer day. And would you believe that this man had heartburn because he thought I was an extreme feminist because I had a cap that said Alice? His own golfing buddy said, as an Alice in Australia. I said, right. Alice in Texas. When I told him it was Alice where I came from, his face went white. What fools we mortals be. You don't think it's real? It is real. It is real. True women have gone ahead. Of course they have. True they've changed. But we still would behind the curve. She has 3 cousins, all graduates of Duke University. One of them is a realtor up in Dallas. He comes here, sits at the table. He said, Brother Joe, women don't count in Texas. Don't say. Oh, no kidding. Not kidding. She tried to spec a house. You want to know what spec a house is? You build a house and speculate and sell it, She's a big realtor. She couldn't do it. Nobody paid attention to her. She had the money. It's a woman. Beautiful woman. Pretty girl. All 3 girls graduated Duke. I'm visiting an Army depot in Colorado. That's before that night I was going to speak at the Associated United States Army. So I was visiting the supervisor, visiting the plant. I'd never been there before. And I was walking through this campus-looking thing with a bunch of barracks, old barracks, with the Equal Employment Opportunity Officer. And he said, Mr. Ramirez, he said, we are training, we're having a human relations class. I said, oh, wonderful. I said, good. How would you like to speak to her? I said, oh, come on, Joe. I said, I came here. I've got other business to do. I'm not prepared to speak. Oh, Mr. Ramirez, come on, speak to them. They're just about to change classes in the classrooms right over there. I said, oh, no, Joe, I'd rather not. No. What do you want me to say? He said, Mr. Ramirez, I don't worry about what you will say. To make a long story short, I finally said, okay. So we walk into the side door, the back, which was the front of the classroom, and here's a horseshoe arrangement of typical Army olive drab chairs and desks. Yeah, you've seen them many times. About 30 or 40 people. They're all, some are chiefs, some are assistant chiefs, some are just plain workers on the line, men and women. And right off the bat, they came and sat down, and Mr. Ontiveros says, we have a distinguished visitor in our area from Washington, and I've asked him to say a few words to you. And they'll sit up and to Mr. Ramirez. So I did what I'm doing with you. I told him all about myself, except I did it quickly. And I said, what I'm telling you again. What fools we mortals be. How cruel can we be to each other for how long? And by that time, they're all sitting up, straight in the chest. You could hear a pin drop. I said, here comes a fellow through that door. He's a heavy-set man and beautifully dressed. except he's got a big white orange tie. And you all say, ha 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 ha. Don't you? Because it don't go with the rest of his attire. Oh my Lord. This man is wearing white socks on top of everything. And I said, he is really a square. They weren't about to giggle. It's not so. We all think it. Some say it. We don't give a damn, you nor I, that this individual wearing white socks for medical reasons. That doesn't mean a damn to you and I, right? How brutal can we be to each other for how long? Oh, here comes the skinny guy through the door. Ha ha ha, the skinny guy, he does a lot of cookouts, you know? And I went on and on, giving them little examples of what public relations is all about.
Rabbit day.
Yeah.
That's Richard on the bike.
Oh yeah.
Mythic. Called Cowboy Chaps and Motorcycle Riders. Ram Chaps. Clever. This is a thank you note from George Walker. Oh,
George Harmon.
George Herman Walker.
Bush.
For a letter that I wrote him on the 19th day of January, 89. I was complimenting him. This is the leadership award that my people surprised me with and brought my wife in, and that I was telling you about. As far as I'm concerned,
Yeah.
it's possibly one of the finest tributes I've ever received, and I even received the Civilian Military Service Award, which is here, and I consider this just as high.
Yeah.
And this here is a very powerful, very vital organization in America, National Defense Industrial Association. I'm a life member. And that is having always be vigilant to have a ready industrial base of the nation for whatever may come to pass. Those are Richard's inventions, and it's called
That over there.
in a corner. It is called Lightfall, and it is the principle is that the light that illuminates a beautiful pastoral scene at the bottom of the case, the illumination coming from the bottom of a candle at the top, and there's one in the kitchen you can see, and here he is in Vietnam.
You're in the white.
Let me try. This here is an old man who wanted to play golf before he died. And they asked me if I'd be willing to play with him. I said, sure, I'm an old man myself. His name was the name of a hardware store. It's on there, I can't remember. But anyhow, and this is me here. And others. And we played. He played eight holes and he got tired and he quit. But he gave me the highest compliment. He said, of all the people that I had to play with you, and you are a gentleman. And I went on to finish the tournament. I won the tournament. A week later, he died. His name was, it's on there. I can't read it.
Bertrand McIntyre.
McIntyre. Yes, indeed. Thank you.
McIntyre Hardware.
Hardware, yeah. Here's El Botín, the very famous restaurant in Madrid where Hemingway used to hang out. And we get Christmas cards from Mr. Gonzalez every year. We were there in
He's an
19.
artist too. He
Yeah.
drew that pen and ink.
Every year. The Associated United States Army gave me a presentation for what I did for the small business community of America. Over there.
Are those books in the way?
The key award of the blacks honored me also for what I had done for the blacks. The one with the key.
Huh.
And one is LULAC, where's LULAC? The LULAC presentation also, because I was president of the League of United Latin American Cities. One of those is LULAC. In 1973-74. And I gave Henry B. Gonzalez one of the finest tributes ever given to Congressman. It was a fantastic. He passed away recently.
Wow.
Yeah. Here I am with Chichi Rodriguez. Tell your brothers. That's Chichi. It is Chichi. It is Chichi. And the rest are pictures of my family. Yeah.
Nieces, nephews, brothers.
Yeah. Here I am on National Guard days with our soldiers.
Here he is with all four of his brothers.
Yep. There's only one missing. That's the one in Colorado.
Yeah.
Here'd be courting days in Newark, New Jersey.
Yeah.
Here's my bride. Here's newlyweds in Pomona.
Yeah.
And this is Richard's house over in Virginia, but that's okay. You'll visit there next time you come in town. Yeah.
Look forward to it.
And this is when I went to a Radmac. Look at here. It says Army.
You tell him about Radmac?
Yes. Army Center. What trains man from Alice? We have an act duty for a week. And what is this here? Huh? This is blue light?
No, I think the
No, the other was
Yeah.
that was LULAC, yeah. We had a wonderful experience since 1973, 74. Hole-in-ones.
What all did you do with LULAC?
League of United Latin American Citizens, promoting the social economic welfare, educational, social and economic welfare of American citizens within the system.
I just saw that on the piano.
This is my high school graduation.
Put your hand down. He's
I got it.
All right, now let me show you this before you. My graduation exercise.
There's a glare. Yeah. Actually, that's probably not very good with a video camera.
That's
Being sideways.
That's the one that received so much acclaim, even though the honor was not mine, but the speech was. And here's the first car I ever owned. There's a receipt for it.
What year model Chevrolet?
1951 Chevrolet. I paid $1,831.
Did you see this one?
No, I didn't.
That's the family group.
Yeah.
About 5-6 years old.
Wow.
You recognize all but two people in there.
One of
Our daughter's on the extreme right. Her husband is beside her on her right.
on the right side. Yeah.
That takes care of everybody.